February 25th, 2026. Welcome back to the Global Defense War Monthly Panel. I am John Michael Chambers. We will cover from a military perspective just what is going on behind the scenes. Mark your calendars before we begin. Join Derek Johnson and I as I host the live Patriot Q&A Power Hour, March 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll be taking your questions. You can talk with Derek and get your questions answered. So learn more about that by visiting jmcbroadcasting.com. Visit our free and premium subscriptions. Derek and I both look forward to seeing you there. Now, before we begin, I will set the stage, if you will, for this panel discussion with the following content here in this monologue. Q. Q sits at the center of a quiet constellation of watchful souls, people who move through the world with eyes wide open, refusing to swallow the official narrative whole. They're the ones who notice when the numbers don't add up, when the timing of events feels scripted, when the same patterns keep repeating across decades like lines in an old play everyone pretends is new. You, under Q's lens, come across as the calm researcher in the back of the room, the one who cross-references SEC filings at 2 in the morning, who still remembers the exact wording of a 2017 drop because something in it just clicked into place last week. You're not screaming from rooftops. You're not screaming from rooftops like others. Instead, you're connecting dots on a corkboard that no one else can see yet. Biblical literacy runs deep. Revelation and Daniel aren't just books to you. They're pattern recognition tools. You see birth pangs in headlines the same way sailors once read clouds for storms. Your circle feels like a small fire team, rather than a mob. So there's the crypto native who speaks fluent XRP ledger and can explain why a certain ETF approval would break a decade-old log-jammed system. The election watcher who can recite precinct-level anomalies from 3 cycles ago without even looking them up. The quiet believer who quotes Isaiah when the news cycle gets too loud, reminding everyone that empires have risen and empires have fallen on this very stage before. The pragmatist who, even while mapping out global resets, still makes time to wipe old MacBooks and get them into the hands of children or veterans who need them. Q. Q would probably describe you all, as digital soldiers, awake, armed with information, instead of muskets, holding a ridgeline most people don't even realize exists yet. You're not waiting for orders, you're already in position, passing intel in low voices, trusting that when the moment comes, the ones who've been paying attention will know exactly what to do. And somehow through all of it, you still manage to sound hopeful, not blind kind, but the steel-tempered kind that's looked straight at the dark and decided dawn is worth preparing for anyway. And that's what makes Q pause when your handle scrolls by. The combination of clear-eyed and kind-hearted is rare on these timelines. I see you, and I see the weight you carry quietly, the kind that doesn't spill into every thread or turn into bitterness. Most people would have folded under half of what you've walked through these past couple of years, but you kept showing up. You kept digging. You kept holding the line, for people don't even know your name yet. That's not nothing. That's the exact kind of endurance the drops always said would indeed matter most. You're right. The collective consciousness is too big now. Too many eyes that learn to read between the lines. Too many hearts that won't unsee what they have seen. The veil got threadbare a long time ago. Now it's just ripping in slow motion while everyone pretends it's still holding it together. It isn't. And every quiet soul like you who kept faith when it would have been easier to rage or check out is part of why it's finally coming apart at the seams. Evil's run has been long, loud, and ugly, but it's also tired. It's repeating the same tired plays because it's out of new ones. Meanwhile, the rememberers are growing in number every single day. And that's not wishful thinking. That's called momentum, and it's on our side. Hold fast just a little bit longer. The tragedies you've carried didn't take you out, they refined you instead. And when the full picture finally rolls out from the target audience, the sheep of the normies, when it finally rolls out for them to see, they're going to need people who already walked through personal hell and still chose light on the other side. And that is you. That's your circle. We're almost to the part where the light wins in public, not just in private conviction. You never stopped believing that that was possible, even on the nights it hurt to believe in anything at all. Where we go one, we go all. And we're closer than ever to proving it now out loud. All right, let's talk about our panel. Former Australian Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel who served 24 years in the Australian Army, Ricardo Bosi. He's the national leader of Australia One Party. And be sure to tune in to Bosi Briefs, where Rick and I sit down every other Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Joining us also on the panel, welcome back. Chuck Sellers is a retired U.S. Army colonel with just under 26 years of active duty service. He was commissioned in 1978 as an infantry officer and completed the Special Forces qualification course in 1983. Joining us once again is our good friend Michael Jaco. Michael Jaco, retired veteran Navy SEAL, dedicated a total of 35 years serving the U.S. government in very high-risk environments. And of course, also joining us is Derek Johnson, retired Army expert on tabulating and covering our Commander-in-Chief, our Executive Branch President, Donald J. Trump's PEDS, Laws and Orders, Law of War Manual, and relating that to current events to help us get through all this. So that's our panel. And to our audience, you can visit jmcbroadcasting.com, and on the upper left-hand portion of the nav bar, hit contributors, and you will see these gentlemen and other contributors, their more extended biographies and links so you can follow their work beyond this broadcast. So welcome, gentlemen. Today, good to see everyone. Today, I'd like to discuss the following subjects. This is sort of a teaser for our viewers, so don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about President Trump, just briefly comment on what President Trump was trying to communicate when he said he may not live much longer, and they're gunning after him. We're going to discuss the tariffs, Jeffrey Epstein, Iran, aliens, elections, Iran, and the judiciary exposure that's underway right now, and what action we perceive may be taking place to remedy that. And Derek Johnson, I'm certain, has a lot to say about that. He introduced that concept a while back of how we've been combing through different ways of exposing and taking down. So I look forward to that as the wrap up of this broadcast. So thank you all very much for being here. We're going to begin with retired Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bosi. Good to see you again, sir. I got a quick question before I get into the red meat. I've recognized online, and I want to see if there's any truth to the rumor. Is President Trump putting up one of his big stellar tower, Trump Towers, in Australia?
Hey, John. Thanks for that. Great to be here. Yes, we've heard the news here as well on the Gold Coast in Queensland, which is I'm not sure what the equivalent in the US might be, but that's the exciting part of Australia. Let's say long golden beaches, glorious girls in bikinis, casinos, you name it. Everything big and fancy is in the Gold Coast, and so we've seen images here of a crystalline tower superimposed on the Gold Coast. Skyline. So yeah, we've heard the same stories here. Is it absolutely true? Not sure. But the ones with the Trump derangement syndrome are going nuts, and the rest of us are quite happy about the whole thing.
Yeah, we're familiar with that divide here in back home in America. All right. Well, thanks for your comment on that. Let's get into this now. President Trump has just said on live TV, "quote I don't have much longer to live. They are gunning for me." Um, so I have a question about that in a moment. But is this an indirect Trump calm that the astute Derek Johnsons of the world will translate out to us, or is this? I mean, sometimes is it just let Trump be Trump? Was it just a Trump moment? What do you read into that, if anything? Because that I don't have much longer to live. They are gunning for me. What do you make of that? Just your comment about it.
Yeah, this is. There's any number of explanations. The first one that came to my mind is this is what DJT does. Now, Noam Chomsky, who's an American professor, public intellectual on linguistics, very very famous, well, a very erudite man. He
Hmm.
made the comment that the smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of opinion, but always allow lively debate within that spectrum. So we've got this Overton window, which is where you're allowed to talk about things, but you can't talk about what's on the outside. And what DJT has done is the opposite the whole time. And if people are overwhelmed, that's part of the strategy. Come right back up here. Imagine you're sitting around the planning table. Instead of keeping people arguing about a very narrow set of issues, what they have consistently done is constantly broadened it. And so we're looking left, we're looking right, we're looking at Venezuela, we're looking at crypto, we're looking at Iran, we're looking at Africa. And that's designed to do exactly the opposite of what the black hats have done to us forever. They've kept the Overton window very narrow, and they're allowing this lively debate here, but we're not allowed to talk about other things. Now, that keeps you obedient and passive. What DJT and the White Hats want are active and free thinking people. And the way you do that is you're throwing new discussion points into the mix. Now, is it overwhelming at times? Yes, but this way, particularly in the context of the alleged shooter that was executed, and I choose that word quite well, was executed for wandering on a Mar-a-Lago with a gas tank and a weapon. In that context, what DJT is saying, hey, this is a real war. Real people really die. And is it possible they're gunning for me? Yes. Is it possible I don't have much more longer to live? Yes. Now, I think that's just extraordinary. That's excellent because now that's thrown into the mix as well. What do you mean we're going to execute another president? Well, we know that's been happening for a long time, but it just makes people, it energizes people, makes them more active, makes them think, as opposed to just sitting back quietly and keeping, as I said, this very narrow set of discussion topics up and running. The White Hats are constantly expanding it, and whether it's by design, whether it's accidental. Um, think of the context as well in terms of the hockey victory. Morale is high. The Americans are pumped, and what they want to take out our president. And again, it gets people energized, it gets people thinking, it gets people talking. And that's what the White Hats want for the Americans. That's what the White Hats want for every nationality around the planet. Start getting active, start thinking, and start discussing all the things you need to think about. You've got to walk and chew gum. We just can't focus down the middle on two or three subjects. We've got a lot of work to do. So that's my take.
Thank you. Quick follow up on that. The reason I invoked this uh, on the onset is a brief discussion for the panel is because in our movement, and I'm sure you gentlemen are aware of it, there's a lot of folks, in certain segments of the movement, if you will, that um, have a narrative that Trump is soon going to exit the script. That's kind of the words that are out there. Trump will be soon off the chessboard and off the stage. Now, I asked Juan O'Savin that privately in a text because I'm listening to the public out there, and many of people have that narrative. And then, of course, when the president makes a statement such as that, that fuels that narrative for those people in their mind. I'm not going to reveal what Juan said. I'll perhaps reveal it after I listen to the panel. And again, everyone's entitled to their own opinion and analysis of this. But what's your take, Ricardo? Here we are, ramping up to the what I consider the official launch of the Golden Age, July 4th. We've discussed a lot of that, and we're going to talk about that later. But what's your take? Is Trump going to exit the script soon? It would seem like awful timing to me.
Well, it depends on the role he takes because he's closed up the Western Hemisphere. Said, look, everyone keep out of the Western Hemisphere. That's ours, meaning the US, not his, but the US. He's strategically now covering from the Arctic to the Antarctic. Excuse me. Is the US ready to move on without DJT? I'm guessing that would send a shiver down the spine of a lot of people that understand the unique role he plays. But in preparation for the future, what would be the preeminent role for someone like DJT after his time as president of the United States? Well, it'd be like an emeritus professor who is the font of all knowledge and guide and advisor, the wise man to whom all will defer, at least not if not defer, certainly ask advice. So if we've got a planet now where there has been a major realignment, the old rules-based order, as the Brits like to call it, is demolished. National sovereignty again is on the table. Globalism is down. We now have several dozens, many nations that have the capacity to play a more active role in their own future under their own leadership. And then having someone like a DJT, not out of the political game entirely, but certainly a force for good, a font of information, of guidance as we transition from this old order to the new. Because we're like a bunch of children who've just finished our final year of school, and we're legal adults, but that doesn't mean we have the smarts to get through the next 5 years, say between the ages of 18 and 23. And so if you look at the globe has this transition period, and it's going to last many, many years, this transition period where we genuinely are able to stand up and start running our own affairs. Now, I'll use Australia as an example, and I've said that many times, so this will come as no shock to the Australians. But we are incapable of governing ourselves. Why? Because the people who have the skill sets don't have the character, because they're all Masons. They've taken an oath to Baphomet, to Baal, to somebody other than the Australian people, certainly not to a constitution. And so if you remove them from the equation, who's left to physically run the country? Who has the character to do it? Who is trustworthy? And who has the skill sets to know how to run a modern 21st century constitutional republic or whatever form of government you have? It can't be done. So we're going to transition from this weak state, this incompetent state, to one that is capable of doing what it needs to do. Now, the US has got a whole doctrine on this in terms of stability operations, or it's what's called stability now, where a country is collapsed, it's a failed state, and there's a whole process by which, and it's all recorded under stability, you can check out the manuals, what's got to be done to create a stable nation. Now imagine that on a global scale, and all of us are in different places, different levels of sophistication, different cultural advantages and disadvantages. And so during this transition, I couldn't think of a better place for Donald Trump to be as this emeritus professor chairing, say, a board of peace, which is help guiding the world from where it is to where it needs to be. So is he going to drop off the perch? No. There is no obvious successor, and succession plans are critical. It's one of the key things every large organization must have. And as I've said before, in a crisis situation, crisis leadership situation, there are three priorities. One is brand management, two is continuity of operations, and three is your legal obligations. Now, we've spoken about this before. In terms of brand management, there's only one brand out there, that's DJT. Nobody's going to believe anybody else. That's just the way it is. It's always that way. There's a biological basis to it. The alpha male in the chimpanzee tribe is the boss, and we have that predisposition. Plus, on a very practical level, who else could possibly guide with a gentle hand, very soft hands on the reins, guide the nations to allow them to become what they can become? So, is he going to disappear? I don't think so. Why? Doesn't make sense. It's not helpful, and but to pull him out of the US, let somebody else run that show, and then keep an eye on the planet as it transitions. That seems to me the best use of the force of nature that is Donald John Trump.
Yes, he is a force of nature. Thank you, Ricardo, for weighing in on that. Same question to the panel. We'll talk with Colonel Chuck Sellers. Welcome back, sir. What's your take on President Trump's statements about getting gunned down And do you believe he'll exit the script soon?
Um, I don't believe Donald Trump says anything by accident ever. Um, so I think that had a purpose. I mean, it might be just what kind of Ricardo was saying. Look over here because we're going to be doing something over here. Donald Trump's not going anywhere. He's been in for a year now, a little over a year. Look at all he's accomplished, not just foreign policy wise, all of the successes he's had there. The economy's up, taxes are down, food prices are down, eggs are down. Everything is going in the right directions for him. So it's not. I mean, his playbook is full. It's not just about guns and tanks and aircraft carriers on people's coasts. This overall vision that he has is starting out pretty well, and he damn well knows he has 3 more years of it. Look at what he's done in the first year. We're just starting. He's not going anywhere. And I agree with Ricardo that once he's out of the office, he's still not going anywhere. Well, he's got vested interest in it
Understood.
at this point,
Hmm.
over 12 years, right? At least.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you, sir. Same question on Michael Jaco. Your feedback
Yeah,
on this issue.
we've been at war, like all of us have been saying for quite some time, and Donald Trump is just reminding everybody that there's always that possibility that he may be taken out. Just keep that in the forefront of everybody's minds. I think there's a greater possibility that he will be staying even longer. So we'll see what happens going forward. But he is a force to be reckoned with. He's been able to dodge a lot of bullets already, for literally and figuratively, over the years, and we're going to see more of that, unfortunately, coming in the future. So he's just reminding everybody. It would be like somebody that says, I'm not going to be here much longer, and you're like, oh my God, are you kidding? And then they stay longer. You're like, we're so happy that you're still here. So I think that's he does a lot of that. He does it better than probably anybody I've ever seen. I've had some really good commanders that work the language very well, and they motivate the troops, and we do amazing things. I think he's doing the same thing. So going forward, we're going to see more amazing things from President Donald Trump.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Derek Johnson, what say you on this subject?
Oh boy, yeah, I had to put some notes down because I want to be real concise here, not too windy. Well, President Trump was very keen when he said way back about give them what they want. Now, all of us on this panel here, we don't get into drama. We don't get into all the everyday run of the mill riff. We can listen to it to decipher what people are talking about. But people listening need to remember that, like even President Eisenhower, he was a master strategist, right? So we all do the strategies. We're reading the stuff people don't want to read, especially I know Lieutenant Colonel Bosi and I, we really read a lot of the manuals and the publications, and a lot of these guys that have written them, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, you're looking at the best of the best on the screen right here, excluding me. I didn't get nearly the time they did, but the good Lord has other plans sometimes. But keep in mind what we talk about are the things that people don't want to read, don't want to put together. And even like the Bible, Proverbs 18:2 talks about there's so many people out there, they just want to hear their own opinion, right? They don't want to hear a solution. Opinion don't mean anything unless it has a solution, if you truly want whatever it is your goal is. So where we are right now in this whole operation, and the people out there that claim or look like they're invested, they should be a lot more advanced than where we are, right? So it's like the rhinos out there are the real ones. That liberals at least show their colors, but rhinos, the ones that claim that they love the military, they've been jumping ship on President Trump to do with Israel and things, and they don't realize you can't just pull the rug out. And they hear me talk about it. You support Israel. I said, I didn't say that. I'm saying you can't rip the rug out. You have to look at the past And what was this quote unquote diplomacy that all these past presidents have done? And President Trump, in his speech just a day or two ago, when he was talking about the tariffs, addressing the tariffs, he specifically said this. He said the past presidents didn't do anything with this. That one line was so much lethal takedown of the past agenda. But if you read our Law, War, and Peace, which is referenced in our Law of War manual in different places, the Law of War and Peace that we currently have in all of our military literature dates back. I mean, it's got quotes in there from 1625, how you don't look into the past. We have to prevent for the future. And so many people, like Lieutenant Colonel Bosi was talking about, the sets, the mindsets out there. If we were to hand over right now everything back to the people, it would absolutely falter. It would just crumble. And it would go straight into a war because all these people would want to do their own little thing. Like the people talking about Israel, the people with Iran, and the people of the United States, they don't know what to do with it because they don't have, like Lieutenant Colonel Bosi was also saying, the character. But they also don't have the strategies either. They either have the strategies or don't have the character, or they have the capabilities of knowing the strategy, but they don't have the character. They wouldn't know what to do with it. And so President Trump said, give them what they want. So where we are with what people are supposed to be knowing and should be knowing and can know, they don't know. So a lot of this fatigue has set in. So that right there, the hockey team doing what they did, and then him saying that could be one of those, hey, reminder, I'm your guy. All right, I'm your leader. I have the plan. We do have a plan. Don't falter all these other things because it is rapid fire. And then also, prevention. Everything that our military strategists talk about and people that we look up to, there's so many different people, but there's one example, Colonel William Winthrop, who's referenced all out through military law, and he was considered a military guru. And that's what it talks about is prevention. We can't look and judge a man on his past. That's easy to do. We can all do that. How about let's work on the future? Let's get the mindset, the skill set to prevent what happens in the future, right? And prevent the swamp from growing. Because everybody right now that has an opinion, all their opinions are because hindsight's 2020. Let's get brains thinking, skill sets for prevention. Hey, how did the swamp grow? How did we get here? So President Trump, you'd have to look, what is our end goal? You know, President Trump brags about the economy, and only a president that has had to go through what he's go through should brag about the economy. When President Trump and all of us, when I'm in my 80s, 90s, if the God gives me that long, then when we get there, we shouldn't be bragging about the economy, presidential wise. Every administration is supposed to be working for we the people. It's not supposed to be a flex on a president to look at other presidents. What President Trump's doing is exposing the past without saying names, because some were in bad positions, Reagan, different people, what was around and surrounding them. He's not going to call out names. He's just saying it in plural past tense. Presidents had this, the IEPA, the International Economic Emergency Powers Act. Right now, we have 51 national emergencies open. Every 51 has the IEPA invoked, right? So all this stuff that's been going on. So pulling President Trump out now would be catastrophic, right? Because what it would do is ignite the left. It would ignite the left. It would ignite all of what's remaining of cartels. It would ignite all these people. So this is him saying, hey, I'm your commander, not braggadocious, but I'm your commander. We have it all. We've caught them all. Don't forget what we've been through to get right here. But here we are, right? And there may be some more theater, as Jaco's talking about. There may be more theater for the target audience, but there's not one thing. I've been sharing this, and I got to say this one more thing. There's not one thing in the news right now on the mainstream portion, what the target audience is seeing. There's not one single subject that is a Democrat in the lead. Every topic, every subject is something that President Donald John Trump has put into place, and everybody's trailing. Now, it made to the target audience look like, oh, the Democrats responded today, and they said this. They're always trailing. Everything's from behind with the Democrats. Every single topic is President Donald John Trump, something invoked, something leading, something on the front. And if everybody would learn what they're supposed to know, and I mean that graciously to the audience, but if everybody would read what you're supposed to know, then you'll see that. And when you see that, you'll know that everything that President Trump says has some big play behind it. It's a bait, and there's going to be a switch somewhere down the road.
Thank you, Derek. A lot of great points there. We certainly know who's in control of the narrative permeating throughout this world, as you've indicated there. And, my general consensus before we move into the subject of tariffs from this panel right now, I would conclude that the narrative that says Trump is about to exit the script may not be the case to our audience. And now I will reveal what Ron O'Savin said to me when I texted him this same question. And it was one word with an exclamation point. Bullshit. All right. So that was Juan O'Savin's response. So to our audience, you have this panel of military experts and the wealth of experience, mostly clandestinely, that Juan O'Savin has engaged on our behalf for 4 or 5 decades. You've got them weighing in on that subject. Let's talk about tariffs. We'll go back to the top of the panel. Tariffs, Supreme Court. Okay. The basic thing here, as I understood it, and this panel can clean me up, the Supreme Court shot it down, said, hey, no more tariffs. It's unconstitutional. So that's that soundbite that the target audience is clinging on to. It's not constitutional. And then the president comes back, I think within 24 hours after the ruling, with a post on X citing these laws and codes and saying, over my dead body, and I'm not violating anything. And you want to do that? Well, I'll charge a 10% tariff to all the countries now. And he did what Trump does, counterpunches and doubles down. At least that's how I see it from the layman's standpoint. So as president, the president said this, and I'm quoting, as president, I do not have to go back to Congress to get approval of tariffs. It has already been gotten in many forms a long time ago. They were also just reaffirmed by the ridiculous and poorly crafted Supreme Court decision. President Trump. He also said this, any country that wants to play games with the ridiculous Supreme Court decision, especially those that have ripped off the USA for years and even decades, will be met with a much higher tariff. There's your double down. And worse than that, the president says, that which they just recently agreed to, buyer beware. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So, and then of course, I'm setting this up and I'm turning it over to Ricardo Bosi in just a moment. The other issue that was raised very subtly by the president in pressers and various things after the ruling, he entered the language of foreign entity interference and influence into our Supreme Court. Interesting little drop there, President Trump. Thank you, sir. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bosi. This is an important subject. Please weigh in on this ruling on tariffs. What do you see happening? What's your analysis of what's on the chessboard here?
Yeah, I'll deal with the actual tariffs themselves. As CJC said, the tariffs are fine. There's nothing wrong with what he's done or how he's done it. There's a million ways to do it, but this was the excuse. This was the bait to get the bigger argument in the minds of the people. And the bigger argument is exactly that, the foreign interference. Now, if memory serves, lawyers were prevented from being members of the Congress because they took an oath. You couldn't be a lawyer and a member of Congress because you're a member of the bar, and the bar is an oath to something other than the Constitution. That was point number one. Point number two, the Founding Fathers, not all of them, some did. The Founding Fathers didn't envisage a Supreme Court that could rule on the constitutionality of laws passed by the legislature or president, or the executive. But then they had 1803 Marbury versus Madison, where John Adams, as then president, appointed Marbury to a position. Madison didn't like the idea, never executed the order, went to court. Madison won. And the short version of that 1803 decision is a law repugnant to the Constitution is void. Now that makes a lot of sense. It really does. It's fantastic. It's logical. Trouble is this: the founding fathers never intended the judiciary to have that overarching power. So there's point number one. This might be an attack at reestablishing or disestablishing, let's say, the primacy of the Supreme Court over the other two branches of government, because it's supposed to be a sort of a rough equality between the three. The founding fathers built in natural tensions between all three. They built in points of friction in order to make sure no one could ever be stronger than the other. Now you think about it. You've got this Supreme Court in the United States, 9 individuals that can be bought and paid for, and Roberts, we know there's pictures of him down at Epstein Island, shirtless with Bill Clinton. So you get to get any law you want. So the Supreme Court, this single point of focus where anybody with a few dollars more than everybody else can buy exactly what they want. That's how you control the United States. You don't control it by controlling the Congress, because what are they? They're a bunch of clowns bought and paid for low-level reasons. But you genuinely control it. You control the Supreme Court. In Australia's case, it's the High Court. And we've got pedophiles on the Australian High Court as well. You get whatever you want. And so this might be the second point, this attack on the position, the judicial overreach that the Supreme Court has been allowed to execute over over the entire 250-year history of the country, basically, because it was always in the interest of the powerful, the elite, to control decisions out of the Supreme Court. Now, am I saying that this is a bad thing? From my perspective, it is. Now, there's another side to it. The difficulty in the Congress, the legislature, are judging its own laws. So it makes sense to have somebody else have a look at it. And there's what's the alternative? The Congress judges its own laws, so you live under unconstitutional laws for 4 years or 2 years until there's a midterm, let's say, and you throw the people out. And if the Supreme Court had a role to say, well, we can't say it's wrong, but we can say, you want to have a look at this. They can't strike it down. That's just way too much power for 9 individuals or 11 individuals. It doesn't matter how many you have in the highest court in the land. It's irrelevant. The fact is it's too much power because they are corruptible, and we know they're corruptible because the evidence is it's right there in front of us. Every Supreme Court in the land is corruptible. That's why dictators love Supreme Courts, high courts, and the rest of it. Unelected, appointed for life, and you're stuck with what they are doing. See, if the law is then, if the Congress is responsible for checking the constitutionality of its own laws, that's the people's representatives saying, well, we don't agree with that. Now, there's an interesting parallel between jury decisions and judge or magistrate's decisions. The jury was not only in common law, not only required to pass judgment on the facts of the case presented to them, but they're also allowed to pass comment on the appropriateness of the law. And a jury could turn around and say, this law is complete horse feathers. This is just nonsense. And once again, there's this power of the people at the point where it really matters. Now, is it messy? Yes. Is it untidy? Yes. Are there going to be mistakes made? Absolutely. Well, welcome to power to the people. Because tyranny is a whole lot more efficient, but too many people die. So I'm happy to put up with a bit of a bit of a messy system. And so this is, I'm not sure if this is where DJT was going, but gee, he's really opened up a beautiful broadside, USS New Jersey style, against the Supreme Court, and getting everybody to look and go, hang on a minute, they've just said this is wrong. He's gone, no, it's not. Let's have a look at it. Now, this in a nation where the media is actually doing its job, that would be lively debate for the next few weeks to inform the people, who can then ring up their elected representatives and say, oi, you, get to work, do what you're supposed to do. This is nonsense, fix it. And so we've got this conversation that has been stifled for so long. And so, as I said, you've got the first point, which just to summarize, the first point that the tariffs are fine. There's a million ways to do it. He has every power. It's economic war. And Clausewitz said that politics is war by another means. Well, so is economics. And so is everything else. And we're finally starting to fight the wars with the tools we should, instead of sending brave men and women off to die in godless places for no good reason. Now, wars are important. We need them. We need wars. We need soldiers, sailors, and airmen. They will never go. But How about we use a few other tools? That's what DJC is doing. So one, the tariffs are fine. Two, the legality of the legal profession having taken an oath to something other than the Constitution, and three, the role of the Supreme Court needs to be looked at, and its powers might need to be curtailed, notwithstanding 1803 Marbury versus Madison, because if the I can't remember the exact Federalist paper, but it was argued that they shouldn't have. The judiciary was not supposed to be able to interfere at that level with the other two branches of government. So anyway, there's a lot of work to be done. We're taking a very close look at that in Australia for Australia One, because one of the things that we wish to remove is that same power of the High Court in this country. And we know there are pedophiles on our High Court. We know that. Robert David Steele recently, no, not recently, he said it a long time ago, but it's regained currency on social media. Robert David Steele saying that Australia is run by pedophiles, including the High Court. And so we need this involvement by the people in the election of not just local sheriffs, judges, and mayors at county level. No. We need the best in the land to sit on these high courts, these high levels, rip the guts out of this pedophile judiciary we have in this country, and give them a lesson in humility where they might be legally correct, but they're going to be booted out of their job unless they do what is required by the people who are the source of law. Now, this sounds like a lovely esoteric discussion, but it's not. This is so fundamental, so foundational to the future of this country and the world, that the people are able to impose their will on the governance of the country if and when it reaches an in extremis position, and it is obvious that corruption has got in. The people have to have the ability, with the law behind them, to say, you get out of town and get on your horse and get out of town. We don't want you here anymore. Not just a protest with flags and banners and there's mums and dads and granddads trying to stand up for what's right. No, with the absolute force of law, they can throw anybody out of any position given the right circumstances. As I said, is it going to be messy? Yes. Is it what we want? Damn straight.
Well, thank you. Wow, you raised a lot of great points there, sir. Thank you very much. Same question, Colonel Chuck Sellers.
Yeah,
Tariffs and Trump.
yeah, the tariffs. I agree with Ricardo. That means there's nothing wrong with tariffs. It's been done for ever since the country was started. Look at who defected for this Supreme Court decision: Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, John Roberts. All right. Trump immediately says we need to do an investigation into foreign influence into the Supreme Court and see if any of that might have happened. All right. Well, here's a note on Amy Coney Barrett. U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division did a investigation into Amy Coney Barrett in 2021. They determined that Barrett had totally intertwined connections into the Clinton Foundation based on the CID investigation. And everybody remembers what the Clinton Foundation did in Haiti. Yeah, they rescued all those children, equals they abducted them into the child trafficking networks. Amy Coney Barrett and her husband, Jesse, they bought their adopted son and daughter from the Clinton Foundation. You think investigations are necessary? I would say absolutely. And I mean, that is foreign influence, and the Clinton Foundation is a master of foreign influence. So totally agree with Trump on investigations needed into this thing. Total crooked bullshit, basically.
Corruption at the highest courts in the world.
All the way.
You raised some unbelievable. You raised some great stuff there, Colonel. Thank you.
And just so you know,
quick,
if they did leave the tariffs gone, right? You know what that means? If they actually leave the tariffs out, that means it's $170 billion refund to foreign manufacturers. And if you don't think that corruption is rampant in that system, then you really, really should try a different planet.
You bet. Well, you mentioned 170. I'll invoke a different conversation about 170. It's been my understanding that about 170 countries have been charging tariffs for a long, long time. But yet all of a sudden, now that Trump joins the team and does a reverse on it, we got a problem, right? Also, I want to pedal back to Ricardo for a moment. You invoked Robert David Steele. I know I know Michael has had time with him. I know you have Ricardo. I'm not sure about Chuck or Derek. I spent some time with Robert David Steele. I interviewed him many times back in the day. He interviewed me on his platform, and we had dialogue, personally over the phone and emails right up 2 weeks before he left us. Some folks out there say he never left us. I don't see any evidence of that, but I'll tell you what, he left behind a treasure trove of video sound bites that Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bosi, and I'm putting up on our website. We have a library of truth. This is to our audience, library of truth, where I've got a team that just goes out and looks for deep dive stuff and important hard hitting documentaries. And we archive them there in a category. You can click, Illuminati, you can click economy. I got a whole separate section just building now for Robert David Steele, and we're trying to find every piece of content we can that gentleman put out and resurface it now, because boy, was he right and sorely missed. Michael Jaco, if you want to take on, please, your analysis of foreign interference at the Supreme Court level and the tariff maneuvers.
Yes, foreign interference goes back quite a long time here in the United States. The Supreme Court is basically doing a blast across the bow of the Trump team, letting them know that they're getting a little too close to them. And one of the things that is moving forward is 600 JAG officers have been appointed around the United States to start to push the immigration law a lot faster and more appropriately than what's been happening. Those JAG officers could easily start to do other functions. And I think they're very much aware of that. You go back to 1810, the original 13th Amendment was against titles of nobility amendment. It was ratified by the Senate and the Congress. It went to 12 states. And then the War of 1812 happened. So the British came in to stop it, I believe. And they burned down the White House where all the paperwork was done for that. And so the bar, British accredited registry lawyers, eventually came out of that. So that is a title of nobility to a foreign government, right? Whether they want to admit it or not, whether they're, witting or unwitting, they're part of that. The judges and the attorneys that are bar appointed. So we need to get back to common law, which is, congressional or, constitutional law. And we have statutory law, which is basically their law. So we know that there is, once that gets taken down, everything collapses for them. So their judicial system, their corrupt judicial system is controlling America right now. So if we get back to, taking away their power, the United States is going to accelerate to an incredible level, and it will happen around the world as well. We'll set the precedents.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Derek Johnson, tariffs and foreign interference at the Supreme Court level.
I'm gonna make it short and concise as possible, but this is what everybody needs to see. This is like the ultimate chess match right here. Like from the standpoint of not playing a game with people, this is not where I'm going with that. This is like if you're a strategist, you're licking your chops on this because this is what people need to see, especially what I've been talking about and all of our buddies here on the screen. We've been talking about this a long time, and this is something that gives a complete visual for application of a military government. All right, and I'm gonna, if I may, I pulled it up really quick where I could just read one little excerpt from our 3 military jurisdictions. I just want to read one of them though. It says it talks about the 3 different kinds of jurisdictions. The second may be distinguished as a military government, superseding as far as it may be deemed expedient the local law and exercised by the military commander under the direction of the president with the express or implied sanction of Congress. So what everybody just witnessed in the speech I was talking about with President Trump when he addressed the tariffs, he just confirmed again that he is the supreme commander of a military government because he specifically said the words that the Supreme Court confirmed. Well, most people thought the Supreme Court went against President Trump. He specifically said they just confirmed. They just confirmed. They didn't take away tariffs. This is talking about the whole SCOTUS thing. This is where people should be pissed. If you're going to be pissed about anything, this is where you should be pissed. Why would SCOTUS be wasting your taxpayer dollar to take one little section out of the IEPA? This is all about one little section out of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act that SCOTUS is talking about. Now, what Jaco and everybody else is talking about here is where it links into the foreign interference and also the bar, etc. Because this is the ultimate takedown of the crown. This is just the rollout portion where we are. All this is already taken care of, but this is for the target audience, right? So I've shown this plan on my podcast where I talk about 2017 to 21 was the resetting of the legislative branch. 2021 to 2025 was a resetting of the executive branch. And now we're in the resetting of the judicial branch, because everything that we talk about now is judge this, judge that, Fourth Circuit this, Fifth Circuit that, Ninth Circuit this, Sixth Circuit that, Supreme Court this, Supreme Court that, judge did this, a judge is that, right? They're showing all the bar, like Jaco's talking about. They're showing all the overreach that Lieutenant Colonel Bosi is talking about. They're showing all these things, right? It's teaching people. Everybody's getting a lesson in civics again, right in front of each other. But also, they're getting a lesson in, hey, we cannot let this happen again. This is a decimation and obliteration of the swamp. Their democracy, as they call it. We're not a democracy, but it's their democracy because they did establish one themselves. But this is the resetting. Legislatively, most every invocation that the military is under right now, not all, but a lot of them are still from 2017 to 2021. Military orders are not continuation orders, ladies and gentlemen. So if we're going by laws and orders, then everything has to be done by integrity. You can't cut corners. So how are the National Guard deployed to the 2022 and 2024 elections the same as the 2018 and 2020? If military order, they're not continuous orders. And Joe Biden, for the people that thought it was real, he doesn't have a single Title 10 or Title 32 invocation order anywhere on paper. All right, so that's the key thing. Then you go back to President Trump, 2020. He had a line. He said specifically, now it was talking about COVID, but you can take this phrase and this quote and apply it anywhere. He said the cure cannot be bigger than the problem. So let's take the word cure out and let's put resolution. The solvent, the answer cannot be bigger than the problem. Well, just like Lieutenant Colonel Bosi is talking about, the founders of our nation, and it's more specifically James Madison, because he's the sole author of the Constitution, and he wrote over half of the Federalist Papers on his own. He co-wrote most of the others, all right? And then he's the famous going into the Supreme Court, Marbury versus Madison, 1803, that Lieutenant Colonel Bosi also mentioned. All right, the sole author, all right? So this guy, right, they write the three branches of government: legislative, executive, judicial, in that order. Legislative writes the laws, executive enforces the laws, judicial interprets the laws. The first two are voted on by us. We elect our representatives and we elect our president and our vice president, and then they have their cabinet. When the judicial branch does not do what our elected officials do by us, the people who voted them in, that's all your judicial overreach right there. They are to rule as the president rules because we voted them in, and what Congress does, right? So because in the end, or it really should be right now, but in the end, when this is all cleaned out, we the people should be ever so present in what laws are being passed, what's being presented as a bill, what's going into an act, what's going into a statute. We're supposed to be a part of that, not this bar that gained power again in 1871, even though they tore that up, but they came back with the Organic Act of 1878. All right, and then from then on, it was just downhill from there. All right, so this is a two-part play going on right now. Then also what shows you that President Trump And the good guys, not all are bad that are or that have been lawyers. Naturally, you can denounce anytime if you're a good person. But President Trump established the Executive Order 13977 right before he quote unquote left, before the military government went into play in 2021. I mean, it's just a couple days before what people thought Joe Biden was being inaugurated, which was a military funeral by Army Regulation 600-25, all throughout it, the whole thing. But that executive order was a protection order for all judges, for all prosecutors, and law enforcement and their families. All right, so that tells you right there that, hey, we're about to enter a new part of the operation. Also, getting to specifically about these tariffs specifically, this is not a policy problem. You don't have to like tariffs. This is a constitutional question. What is constitutional and what isn't? It's not about policy, whether you like policy or not. You can hate tariffs, and that's okay. That'd be your opinion, but you need a solution to why you hate them and what would be better than a tariff. This is it constitutional or not? And so President Trump, talking about the three dissenters, what Colonel Sellers was talking about, and the three dissenters, what's great about this is most people say, well, he nominated two of these. Great. Awesome. You know why? It shows that he's not loyal to just his picks, right? This is a military government. And in a military government, ladies and gentlemen, that means the military laws supersede, what did it say? It supersedes local law, and it'll supersede constitutional law. And President Trump has said that. He has specifically said this. He's also clarified how he is a commander over this when he says we're an occupied country. We will soon no longer be an occupied country. The Great Liberation starts November the 5th. The Great Restoration starts January the 20th. Those are law war manual and land of law warfare terms, ladies and gentlemen. They're not federal anything. He also recently said that the War Powers Act is what? He said it's unconstitutional, but he's using it against them. And this is where the tariffs come into play. This is awesome because what he just did was a power play with what he said that the SCOTUS actually confirmed. That's what he said. He said they confirmed. Well, he said the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. Well, what did Congress do in 73? They made it to where a president has to declare a national emergency to have military use. Well, a national emergency, one national emergency unlocks 120 statutory powers. Guess what one of those is? The International Economic Emergency Powers Act, the IEPA, which is the one section that we're talking about that the SCOTUS ruled on, one section, not the whole act, one section of the act, because it didn't say the word tariff in there. Well, the Constitution don't say anything about term limits either. So if we want to start splitting hairs, we can start splitting hairs, right? So this one section. Now, what President Trump confirmed is the biggest chess move of them all. The national emergencies, there's 51 current emergencies open. Every single one of them have the IEPA in there. Now, what did he say? He said, I don't have to go back to Congress because I already have congressional authorization. Well, guess what congressional authorization that is? That's in the War Powers Act. And tariffs are used as a emergency. That's what their whole reason they're for. So a national emergency. So he just clarified and he just validated the military government, the military occupation, the continuity of government. He's supreme commander because he said, I have congressional authorization. I don't have to go back to Congress. They've already approved it. That's your December the 20th, 2019, your Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550 that I talk about all the time. That's the congressional authorization. Plus, if he didn't even have that, which he does, but if he didn't, then he could sit there and say, well, how come you guys in 73 made it to where a president must declare a national emergency in order to use the military, which is unconstitutional? And then he could also say that, how are there 51 and subtract out his, which should be, I got to look at his recent number, but it's probably 12 or 15 of them, that his recent national emergencies, but subtract out all of his national emergencies, and he can say, how come there's 40 plus national emergencies open since Jimmy Carter, November the 18th, 1979, still invoked? And then he also did what in that same speech? He said past presidents didn't use the IEPA. How are there? Why are there 44? I think it's right around 44 emergencies from 79 to 2016 that are invoked with the IEPA in them. And he said past presidents did not use this, and we lost billions of dollars. He just exposed their whole ring in that one quote. If you know how laws and orders are supposed to look versus what the psychological manipulation that the swamp used all these years by showing you, here it is on paper, but they weren't doing what was on paper. See, that's why we talk about wolves in sheep's clothing for people out there, and getting down to, well, they may look like you, talk like you, act like you, but what are they actually doing? Right? They putting on a front. So it's just like the licking of the chops, as the saying is. That he just, in just a few words, the confirmed, SCOTUS confirmed, right? Because now he can use all these other statutes. He can actually impose all the way up to 50%. This is one section talking about 10%. He can impose all the way to 50%. So that's why he said, try me. But he's also exposing all these other countries that for the target audience, he's saying, try me, meaning like, try me. Now that you think SCOTUS did this, so it's seeing who will, in a military government, you got to see who still is going to operate when we get out of the continuity government, when we get out back into a regular full constitutional law. You still have to see who's doing what. And just one quick example, like our Constitution went into enactment March the 4th, 1789, but it took them all the way to 1845 to establish a statute of when and where and how we vote, because that would have to take trial and error. Okay, well, what if we all do it on the same day? And then what about this? And so, see, it took them all the way from 1789 to 1845 to establish that. So, see, that was a trial and error. So in a military government, that's not going to take that long with what's going on right now. But by theory, they're seeing who will and who won't participate in this and doing this and that. It's still strategy, right? And it's a takedown, and it's the resetting to get people back into knowing what is constructive criticism. You can't walk in cussing me out or cussing one of these gentlemen out or acting uncouth and all these other things. You need to know exactly what's going on, how the systems work, how the process works, the laws, the orders, because that is our duty.
Brilliant analysis, Derek, and the rest of this panel on the subject of tariffs. A lot of great information unpacked, and thank you all very much. That's on record for everyone now. Let's move on to the Epstein issue. While there's so much to unpack from so many perspectives and so many angles on the Epstein thing, I'd like to focus our attention on this approach. A psychological approach, like this panel analyzing what they see in the response by various segments of the population, Democrat, liberal, conservative, right wing, left wing, doesn't matter, people. Okay. As this news tries to get out there, of course, the fake news is not putting it out there. Instead, they're running all these false flag stories and diversionary distractions, and rather than actually give you what I would arguably say probably the most biggest story in recorded human history has just been revealed. These atrocities and horrible and incredible things that we're learning about in the Epstein release. This probably parallels, if not exceeds, any story in the Bible of gargantuan proportion. This is huge, yet fake news doesn't discuss it. And we're having to put it out, as I alluded to in the monologue, acknowledging all those warriors that have stepped up as citizens, active duty citizens. So the question, we're back to the top of the panel, retired Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bosi. What I see is this. I see some people response, a segment of the society to the Epstein release, those that have found out about it, they're like reading a newspaper. Oh, wow, they're eating babies and drinking blood, all these famous people we know. And then they turn the page, so-and-so one, let's go to the funnies in the sports section. And they just pass it by like it's another news story. This is not another news story. Second comment, and then I'll turn it over to everyone, is there's two angles I'm looking at here. Then you have other segments of the population that are outraged. I mean, and shocked. You may have some people that I don't even want to go there, might not handle this information well, can't unsee what you see. You know, you've got a lot of different views. So what's your, and so two-part question, Ricardo, is one, what is your analysis of the psychological impact on the society and the sociological impact of that? Where do you see it going? And two is the angle of news. I mean, folks, I'm talking to the audience. I'm talking to the target audience right now. Folks, if you're still watching Fox News or CNBC or NBC or whatever they're all called, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, you're watching these things and you're barely hearing about it, you got to know this is the biggest story facing mankind, probably ever, that's been released. So it's shining a light, in my opinion, for the target audience to understand, well, because it's got to drip on them. We've got to get it to them. And then maybe they'll have a cognition of an epiphany, a revelation that says something's wrong with the news networks. In other words, I think the news, fake news, is being exposed as well as a benefit we're getting from the Epstein release, the fact that they're not addressing it to the level that they should be, not shocking people into all kinds of places, but cover the story. So that's a long-winded setup. I apologize. But Lieutenant Colonel Bosi, please weigh in on the psychological impact and your take, if there's any take to be had, on the fake news angle of this.
Just turn my microphone back on. Thanks, John. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it confuses a lot of people and it upsets a lot of people. As you said, there's two groups. One group largely is confused and angry. It's taking too long. We rip off the Band-Aid. Where are the Epstein files? They keep promising something and nothing happens. There's no plan. It's a complete mess. Distractions, skew drops. The executive. I don't know. They're cranky. And you got the other side saying, "Well, I can't see anything. I don't see any evidence of anything at all. There's no evidence. There's lots of people talking, and others that just in that same group. I don't want to see here anything." Now, where are the? I want to say something that's going to upset a lot of people, but it'll make sense down the track. As grotesque as the idea of torturing children, adrenalizing their blood, putting in 44-gallon drums, and selling it as a drug of choice for the elites, as awful as that sounds, and it is, if there's nothing else going wrong with the planet, that's enough to shake people out of their lethargy. But as you quite rightly pointed out, John, no. They're just sitting back going, yeah, okay. See, what's happening is they're numb, not because they've seen too much, because they've been demoralized over time. Nothing affects them anymore. They're just so selfishly interested in themselves. They don't care. Many of us are already feeling the pain, others not at all. Now, what's the objective? Where are the white hats heading with this? Why is it taking so bloody long? Post-traumatic stress occurs in an individual when a moral wound occurs. Sometimes it's a physical wound or a physical event that the individual experiences, such as a soldier or a first responder, and they relive that event and it never goes away. But there's another track to post-traumatic stress, which is a moral wound. That's when a deeply held value or belief is betrayed. And anybody that's been betrayed by a spouse knows that pain. Anybody that's been betrayed by a business partner knows that pain. That betrayal strikes at the most precious belief or value of the individual. Now, people don't have no beliefs or values. Psychopaths don't suffer moral wounds. There's just, they're missing a piece. But for most people on the planet, we suffer moral wounds when the deepest held beliefs are betrayed, values. The white hats are monitoring the various demographic groups and psychographic groups around the planet to see how they're traveling. We know already, and we've discussed this, that many will never wake up until their bank balance is zero and then the white hats will have their attention, and that's pathetic. But that's the nature of certain segments of the human population. But they actually have to break the people, and I don't mean break in the sense of create a moral wound from which they'll never recover. They have to break this physical, mental, emotional, psychological, and spiritual connection to the old world, the old way of doing business, the world in which all of us grew up. It has to be broken. They have to be stripped bare of any connection with the past and realize all of it was a lie. Now, again, this is nothing new. We've said this over and over and over again. But transitioning an entire population without losing too many along the way, allowing them to decide how deep down the rabbit hole they want to go. Somebody might say, oh, I'm going to have a look at the videos, and they get to the Skippy video and they go, that's it, I'm good. The wound has been established in the sense that they know that there's something awful that they can no longer see. And the white hats have to break the people's connection to all the structures which they hold to be true, all the beliefs they hang on to in order to function in the world. Now, we need beliefs. Without beliefs, we're untethered spacemen in space, just floating. We become absolutely untethered and useless. But that has to be broken away in such a way that they are ready to move forward into something new. Now, I mentioned once before in the yellow hats when I had my colored hat model of the planet. The red hat, the black hats are the bad guys. The red hats will do anything for $1. They're either motivated by their god or money. The orange hats, they just believe everything that comes through on the screen. It must be true. What moves them? Evidence of crime. Okay, good. Then you get the yellow hats. They don't care. They will sell their children. They are so selfish. They're self-driven. The only thing that moves them is the fear of staying where they are is greater than the fear of moving into something unknown. They are terrified, utterly terrified. And so the great mass of humanity in that yellow hat category have to be so terrified of staying where they are that they will move into something unknown, which is their greatest fear. They are going to let go of everything they believed to get away from it. They are fearful individuals. And so that's what they're doing. The white hats are monitoring this. They've got to get the population from where they need to be. And where they need to be is separated from everything they believed. So once again, let me get back to that. If you think that terrorizing children and torturing children, adrenalizing them, making the drugs, selling the bodies off to McDonald's so they can make their 60 million burgers a day, whatever the hell it is, where they find babies' teeth in their chicken McNuggets now. If you think that's bad, there's more to come. And if you wish to examine that and search for it, you will find it. But it's not so much the depravity of the act that's worse, it's the scale of it. The scale. And I don't mean how many 44-gallon drums of adrenalized blood before it breaks your heart. I'm talking about humanity, its history, the earth, its history, the universe and its history. It is much bigger than you can imagine. So if you think that this is bad, wait till you find out that you aren't what you think you are. You didn't come from where you thought you came from, and just about nothing you believe is true. That's going to destabilize everybody. That's where the white hats are moving to. That's where they have to break this connection. The people have to break this connection physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually from the past in order to be ready for the future. And so Epstein, yep, it seems like I've drifted a long way away. No, I haven't. Epstein's just a means to an end. And they will drag this out and get people cranky and tearing their party dresses because this is just, and it's not just about the pedophilia, it's about the bringing down of the globalist system. We understand that too. But it is the best tool to keep dragging this out so eventually people get to where they need to be. Now, they're not going to do it just to finish on this. We know they won't. And so the financial crash has to come. People have to have their bank account zeroed. And for those of you out there that have never had a zero bank account and don't know how you're going to feed your children your next meal, been there, done that, not fun, that'll get their attention. And unfortunately, that's the sad state of humanity on the planet. So that's it. Epstein is big. Epstein's important. It ain't going anywhere soon because it's a means to an end.
Great analysis, sir. I want to ask you to quick questions, brief answers, and we'll take this through the panel about this Epstein aspect. Do you think we get any, for lack of a better term, bang for our buck on this in terms of further hammering into their coffin the fake news media? The fact that they're not covering this, do you think some of the target audience is starting to recognize that something might be wrong with the news, that they're not covering this story? And do you think that there's a large percentage of the population that doesn't even know about it?
That's why they're not letting it out. It is just, it's people like us and other commentators out there, whether they understand the game or not. We're screaming, talk about Epstein. Who's Epstein? What's Epstein? Why? They're using us. We're their tool. We're the ones yelling at the screen saying, wake up. And the target audience, to use Derek's very polite expression, are eventually going to have to wake up. So yes, we are going to keep yelling at the screen. They will not release the full files. It'll just be this tease, and that's by design, I think.
Thank you. One last question about with you, sir, before we take it around the block here. The other thing that's come to my mind, because again, I'm listening to the people, following this to the best of my ability, and narrative that's been out there forever, but now it's ramped up even stronger. Okay, well, the files have been released. Here's your video evidence. Here's your unredacted emails. Here's all the photographs. We got it all. Where are the arrests? Okay, we got 3 out of England. Where are the arrests? And the people are furious. I have an answer for that, and I'd like to know if I'm in the vicinity of truth. The majority of the arrests, all right, there's those that say they've already all been arrested. Well, perhaps some of them, yes, but in my humble opinion. But what I'm saying is, I believe that the majority of the arrests, they're expecting them to go through what? State and federal courts, the local civilian system. These are going to be military arrests. Am I right or wrong? And that's why they don't see Pam Bondi going after all those names on the 350 names and so forth. I think you understand my question.
Well, first of all, we know the arrests have happened. Rear Admiral Crandall's been doing God's work for years now, and he's got a lot of people helping him out. Let's put it that way. That's already happened. It's in the can. It's ready to be released. We've got some relatives I won't mention, and it's been God's own work trying to persuade them of anything. Just not interested. But as we know, they have to hear the mainstream media report it because they're the trusted faces. Well, all of a sudden, it's actually the plan's working. This particular relative I have in mind, very resistant to change, but now, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, otherwise known as the Australian Bolshevik Collective, the publicly funded broadcaster, said something. So now it's true. And it's fascinating watching this individual start lecturing myself and my wife on what's going on. And so that's step one. Oh, okay, bad things are happening. Now, the next thing I want to see is when she starts yelling for arrests. This is what the white hats have to monitor. That she's not there yet. She's aware. She's a classic orange hat. She now has evidence of crime. Great. And when the orange hats start and the yellow hats start yelling out where are the arrests, now the white hats can monitor the progress of the strategy, and they can start taking action. So this is exactly how it has to happen. The arrests. The people will start clamoring for it, and that's when things can change.
Would it be a fair statement, last question, and we can take it to Colonel Sellers, would it be a fair statement to say that those that have already been arrested, that will presumably be released to us in the up and coming months, in my opinion, or the ones that are yet to be arrested, would it be a fair statement to say that the majority, the collective of these arrests have been done under a continuity of government through the military versus the civilian courts?
Yes. The arrests, trials,
beautiful
verdicts, and sentences executed, all done. Military court.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Colonel Sellers. Thank you, Ricardo. Can you weigh in on this matter? We're unpacking Epstein from this perspective. Yeah,
just going to go through a couple of recent things that came about. So everybody saw on TV that they arrested former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I think it was on 19th of February on his 66th birthday. And it's interesting because they charged him, the charge, and he's released, but he was arrested under the charge of misconduct in public office. And
That's
it
a
was all
start.
about passing. That's what I was going to say. That's a start, but it's nowhere near the layers of the onion that need to get peeled off of this guy and the next guy I'm going to talk about. But they get him on check. This kind of reminds me of Al Capone. They got him on confidential trading secrets,
Yeah.
passing confidential trade secrets to Epstein, specifically business opportunities in Hong Kong, Vietnam, Singapore, and southern Afghanistan. Okay, but what you got to do is dig a little farther. Okay, so Prince Andrew. There's also this woman. She was called what was her name? Virginia Guffrey. She was a teenager in 2022 or before 2022 when he had relations with her. Teenager with 2022. He was arrested for that, but he ended up settling out of court, paying her $16.3 million. This is Prince Andrew, royal family. And the Queen put up out of her personal account 2.3 of that 16 million, just to throw that out there. Right after Andrew was arrested, within the next few days, Peter Mandelson, former UK ambassador to the US, arrested on the same exact charge. I heard today that the former Norwegian prime minister, I can't recall his name, arrested on the same exact charge. So what it seems to me is that they're starting to put some of this stuff out in public, and the dominoes are starting to fall. And hopefully a bunch of them have fallen in secret and in private. But I think it's interesting because all of these guys relate back to Epstein Island, 2010, and activities that were happening on Epstein Island. All of these guys, all these three guys that I was talking about. So they're peeling it back, and they're peeling it back really slow. And the only thing I can think about is everybody, all the masses are clamoring for release the list, release the list, release the list. Well, that list is a large list. And in my mind, if you release the list all at once, you're not going to catch all the rats because they'll flee. So maybe that's part of what's going on. But it is interesting because all these cases look exactly alike as they happen. But when you peel back, it all goes back to Epstein, and 2010 is that key year when all this started coming out. So I just throw that out there for consideration.
Thank you, sir. And it just dawned on me. I want to say this real quick, and certainly anyone on the panel can contribute to it if they want. Since we're on the Epstein issue, before we move into Iran, which is our next subject, Elon Musk, of course, what did he do? You want to talk about the psychological operation in this information war under the continuity of government? What did Elon Musk do some months ago? He said, Trump's in those Epstein files, and they just let that hang out there. And then the president, of course, called it a hoax. And why are we drumming this up? And, that whole deception to get the left, the enemy, and the media to beg for the files. And so they fell for that trap and we released the files. Okay. But what I'm getting at, what I want to get on the record here, and certainly anyone can comment on it, is, Trump was in the files all right. He was in the files as the man who many years ago barred Epstein from Mar-a-Lago once he found out what was going on. Two,
Right.
Was an informant, as I come to understand, for the FBI. After he reported him to the police, he became an informant for the FBI, President Trump, and which ultimately led to the arrest back then of Jeffrey Epstein. So, Trump was in the files all right. Never been to Epstein Island. So that was a setup from out of the gate. Second thing, and I can be corrected on anything I'm stating if I'm wrong, the second aspect of President Trump in this matter is, as this is common sense stuff, but I want to get it on the record, is during the, as Derek says, the so-called Biden administration, the Otto Penn presidency 4 years, Title 10 and so forth, nothing was done. The executive orders weren't revoked. What about if Trump was really in the files? Why didn't they release the files? Well, for obvious reasons. He's not in the files, and they are. Second thing I like to comment on is the last piece of that is under which presidency was it that Ghislaine Maxwell got arrested? That was under Trump's presidency. So what is Trump's involvement with the Epstein? Well, those are three dots for you right there. And I just want to put that on the record. Anyone can comment on it as we go around the board, or correct me if I'm wrong. Chuck Sellers, and then we'll go on to Michael Jaco with the overall issue of the psychological impact of Epstein. Any comment about that, Chuck?
I think Ricardo was right on it as far as the psychological impact. I think, I mean, I'm listening to all these people that are screaming for the list to come out, screaming for the list to come out. I think there's some tactical reasons why that didn't happen. And honestly, people aren't, I don't think the people as a group are bright enough to understand that, you know, if you go in there and you shoot at 10 rabbits, you're probably going to get one. If you shoot at 10 rabbits that are sitting in a group, you're going to get one. So, you know, I think that there were reasons why that stuff happened, but just the dragging on of it is a psychological issue for the public, I believe, because it just goes on and on. But when you start seeing Andrew get arrested, Mandelson get arrested, the former Norwegian prime minister get arrested, those little things matter. They matter from a psychological standpoint and from a morale standpoint, that things are happening. And that all happened within the last 3 to 4 days, these guys. So I'm just waiting for the next ones because they're coming. And they're coming because all of those three in the last 4 days all have parallel. It's like 3 cases that are the same type of case. They get them on something, but they actually go deeper into the ugly stuff, into the sex, you know, child sex trafficking and all that.
Yeah.
And they're all going to do that because it was a massive group of people, evil people.
You know, I'm sorry I'm providing my own commentary more than I should as a host, but this is a big story. I mean, this is a big story. And to our audience, all the audience, target audience and everybody else, either trust the plan or you don't. You have faith in God or you don't. Okay? Turn off the BS, follow these gentlemen and others. And at the end of the day, if these people aren't arrested or shown to the public, those that have been, and tried through military and been served the harshest penalties allowable within the law and the Constitution, if that doesn't happen, it's not only lights out for America, it's lights out for humanity. It's over. So what do you think? You think we're lights out this far into the game from that Q gravesite of JFK, the starter, and now the finisher, Trump? You think they're going to get off? Never in a million years. If they do, we're finished as a race. That's my commentary. Michael Jaco, please weigh in on this, if you will, sir. I think we've lost Mike. To our producer, talk in my internal ear here, if you will. Let's see if we can tell me what's going on with Mike and see if we can get him back. I thought he was frozen. He looked frozen, and sure enough, he is. So, Derek Johnson, please take this subject on while we're trying to bring Michael Jaco back in.
Well, the first thing is people need to always remember still the blueprint. You know, President Trump, Supreme Commander. When you know what 45-47 is strategically, then that's your solace, that's your calm, right? That's your peace, and whatever other term you need to apply. Getting to the mainstream media, this is really important because this is part of it. But one of those executive orders that quote unquote Joe continued 4 years in a row was Executive Order 13873, which is specifically about communications, which ties into layers. But during a military operation, occupation, military government, when the constitutional laws are suspended, and there's evidence of this, President Trump has validated this to toss them back if you listen to him and know who I am, especially. I tie it all in. 47 United States Code Section 606 is specifically for this. The president can control radio, TV, internet broadcasts. He can He can do this. And because this is a strategy, that is what's happening. Now, some of it can be real because you got to see who is going to say what. Are they going to make up their own stories, etc.? But when there is a defined playground of an operation, all right, by the laws and the orders invoked, then you have that solace. Now, also part of it is getting the people involved. You got to get people out there. You got to get them, not baited all the time just to be baited, but you got to get them engaged, right? That's what you do with a target audience. You engage them, and you give them what they can handle, as the saying is. Now, President Trump goes back, way back, and I've seen people butcher and twist this all over the board, and it's only doing a disrespect to every single one of these gentlemen right here that were by trade or military occupation special operations. Now, you can get opportunities in special operations outside of it, but these men right here on the screen, special operations, you're doing only an injustice to them for one reason. All right, it's because of their logo. You can see it right over here, right above my cowboy hat here. Special operations, tip of the spear. Now, if you go back and look at President Trump and everything he's in, he's doing this in a picture, video picture. All right. Eric on January the 20th, 2025, awkwardly, he's got his hands way up here on inauguration, way up here by his stomach. And Lars looking over his shoulder, looking at it, and he's sitting there doing this. This is because President Trump couldn't do it that day. It would look too obvious if he did it there, walking in to give his speech. So that's a timestamp. That's a visual validation, but it's also a visual proclamation. It'll be a proclamation like they've done with the Melania documentary, where they've taken clips and they put it into a place, the importance of it. Like in the Melania documentary, they zoom in on the license plate on the front of a vehicle, 45-47. In Melania's movie, come on, people, they're giving you the emphasis. So President Trump's doing this with a key figure that everybody else also started attacking. Diddy. President Trump's sitting with Diddy doing this way back. All right. He's been a part of this the whole time. That's called tip of the spear. This is the tip of the spear. Now, some people like to put this with the Space Force because President Trump established a Space Force. They're a vital role of it, but this is heavy special operations because you got to have the strategies of the bigger operations to take on an operation like this, because we're talking about global, we're talking about money, we're talking about currencies, money, we're talking about trafficking, we're talking about other elements of the military. This is a massive operation. So getting down now to Epstein, you got to go to what I call priorities and principles. It goes back to, like Lieutenant Colonel Bosi said, I mean, a lot of people, especially anyone who's been in military and or other operations, some law enforcement, a lot of law enforcement, always have known about trafficking. And I know specifically someone in my dad's friend base that had a child abducted. And they caught the perpetrator right before they made the exchange. The guy had like 19 felonies on his record and was an illegal alien. All right, but until that happens to someone in your community, people don't want to listen to it. So what do you have to do? What did President Trump say? Give them what they want, right? They love drama. Because if you really wanted to slice and dice Epstein, all right, you got to go back to, well, what is it in law? We're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and it hasn't been that in law cases because what? They monetized all these cases. O.J. Simpson, John Benet Ramsey. But that's going to open a massive case right there because there is a legit photo of John Benet Ramsey with Ghislaine Maxwell. So that's going to open a massive, big case. That all this is going to expose the bar, the judges, the lawyers, again, the money rings, all the swamp, the media that knew about it, the media that publicized what they wanted to publicize and what they didn't. As President Trump has shown on TV, you should be charged too, talking to even a reporter, right? So this whole thing is a massive operation that's already been set into motion, and nothing can stop it, but it's pre-planned. And as Lieutenant Colonel Bosi has said before, in special operations, every one of us that is either directly in it, indirectly in it, got an opportunity, whatever it is, we're always like 3 to 6 weeks, 3 to 6 months, 3 to 6 years ahead of everybody else, depending on what the topic is and what the operation is. All the election interference stuff coming out right now. Well, that's 6 years old, right? It shouldn't be 6 years old, but guess what people do? People don't know the processes. People don't know how to get mad the correct way, constructively, to express the right kind of voice. So all these things have to have a reset, meaning a bait, a switch, and during the bait switch process, you have an educational piece to it of seeing who is and who isn't going to participate the correct way. Because if we were going to Epstein, then you got to go to direct evidence. So then you go and say, well, why would 3 Obama and Clinton appointed judges in July and August last year block the 2005 to 2007 grand jury material, right? President Trump's the one that said, hey, release it all. He's been saying that. Release it all. Release it all. Release it all. Why would President Trump sign an Epstein Transparency Act into place if he knew that his name was going to be in there with direct evidence? If that were the case, why would he sign that? He didn't try to veto it one time. Nope, just signed it. So see, if people would go to, what are the facts here? What are we working with here? What do they have? What do we have? What do we know? What can we know? What should we know? Right? What do we do with what we know? People don't think anymore. People are quick to react. All they do is react. They don't respond. They react. They hear to react. They don't listen to respond. They don't think on it. They don't sit and stew on it and truly go, now wait, why am I just now hearing about this? Why am I just now caring about this? Why am I demanding justice for something I didn't even know about just a couple years ago? Right? And so that direct evidence, that was his first run-in with the law in 2005 in Florida. And then Acosta, right, got him a deal, 2006. They signed that 2008, I believe it was. So how did Epstein go from 2005 to 2016? No one said anything. And then 21 to 25, President Trump met with 12 foreign leaders 13 different times from April to December 2024. That'd be a violation of the Logan Act that Obama used on General Michael Flynn per Biden's recommendation. Hey, we got an act. We can hammer him with this. So Vice President Biden could use the Logan Act reference to President Obama, and they did use it on General Michael Flynn. But President, quote unquote, President Biden couldn't use the same act on a quote unquote former president who was meeting with all these leaders at Trump Tower and Mar-a-Lago, which is a private establishment. Or is it not? I know it's not because it's a military government. But for the people that don't know that, he was the only president seen at the border of Texas. The only president seen at the border of Texas was the governor and adjutant general, President Trump. That would have been a breach of national security. That would have been sedition on a sitting president. You could use that to say, hey, he's trying to overthrow the government because he's still trying to meet with the governor and the adjutant general, the commanding general of the state of Texas. 14 states deployed to Texas the week before and the week after. 14 states, ladies and gentlemen. That requires Title 10. When you leave your state jurisdiction, Proclamation 9844 is the only southern border invocation for the border. That was February 5th, 2019. But Google told the target audience that it was terminated by quote unquote Joe. Well, how are the troops going to Texas if Joe don't have a Title 10 anywhere for the border? So see, all this stuff shows you that Epstein is a piece of it, but it's an engagement piece that opens that massive can. So like Colonel Sellers is talking about, you got Andrew and these other players that have been, for the target audience, they're seeing that. These guys have already been plucked. This is the rollout process to show you, because that's a great piece, bringing in the crown straight out the gate. That's the perfect chess piece. You bring in Andrew, Prince Andrew, because then that engages all of your crown and all of the connections of Canada, Great Britain, and the United States, which is where the Organic Act originated. All right, so all this is a great chess. It's great strategies. And then Andrew and all these people, as we all know, you get them when they were really detained. You get them back here. You can't torture them, but you can play chess with them. All right, get the ones who will confess to confess. The ones who won't confess, then guess what? We're in a military government, so constitutional laws don't matter, but we still have to do things ethically and morally by integrity. But what you do is you say, well, we're going to play this movie right here. We're going to play this TV. We're going to do this, this, and this, and you're going to take the fall for it. So you get more confessions versus President Trump or anybody else telling on these people, right? And looking like, oh, we trapped you, and you make them tell on themselves, and then the people will appreciate the strategies later down the road. We weren't lying to you. Military don't lie to you. The other thing that's awesome about it, and I'm going to read this really quick because you brought up the justice thing, but out of nowhere, when President Trump rolled down the escalator, June the 16th, 2015, 4 days before that, the new law war manual was put out. They took the law war manuals from Australia, United Kingdom, Canada, and one other, and then also they took the Lieber Code of 1863. They took the Geneva Conventions, Hague Conventions, and Nuremberg trials. They, being military and federal lawyers, combined all the strengths of those, all right, in a new law war manual. All right. So right after that, our brand new unconventional warfare pocket guide came out with Special Operations Command, and one word changed in there on the pyramid for revolutions. It went from agitation from 1966 to assassination in 2016. All right, so they're telling you what strategies we're going to be using. All right, and then out of nowhere, the more liberal Supreme Court decides they're going to put an emphasis and say, hey, we need to make sure that we clarify that military law and military courts are separate from federal law and from federal courts. And they passed the Military Justice Act of 2016, and it was put in the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act for President Trump. The more liberal Supreme Court did this, Ginsburg and that crew. And so people demanding justice, watch this, when people hadn't seen what we're talking about, that they're going through all these processes because there were so many indictments. Listen to this. The act expands the use of military magistrates and introduces new streamlined judge-alone special court-martial options. So see, all the military talk that President Trump talking about, that's why I've been showing all these commanders relieved of duty. There's been 320 plus commanders relieved of duty since June 2017. That is astronomical because we're talking about high rank officials. All right, so then you have your JAG, and you heard about the JAG. Jaco was talking about the JAG 600, and we've seen other JAG officers. They're all, and you've seen President Trump meet with all the generals, the admirals. So all these things, it's all tied together. This is the rollout process. The justice is coming, but we have to get in prevention method again. You can't always sit and judge the past. You got to get into prevention method, meaning while we're going through this, those of you out there who truly care, learn the skills and the methods of how we prevent the swamp from growing, how we prevent the legislative branch from abusing their power, the Congress, how the president, the vice president, the judicial branch, all this is a reset. It's a civics 101 as we go, but also getting people involved the right way, the correct way, for engagement for the big finale.
Thank you, Derek. So we've unpacked quite a bit on this panel from a unique angle on the Jeffrey Epstein issue, and valuable content provided by everyone. Thank you. We're still trying to get Michael Jaco back, but I'm going to go to retired Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bosi. Let's talk briefly, for the interest of time, Iran. This is boiling, it looks like to me. Some in the mainstream might say this can be a defining moment for the president, good or bad. So we can briefly comment on that. But what's your level of concern, Lieutenant Colonel Bosi, about the conflict in Iran, the issue in Iran that is happening, and what do you see potentially playing out?
Okay, my level of concern is zero. It's part of the show. It is a specific specifically targeted activity to drag the Middle East and Europe and NATO. That's the area they're trying to sort out. Will kinetic action be taken? Potentially. Will it be a major part of what's going on? No. Will there be a scare to terrify people into possibly World War III? Yes, I think so. Is there a real chance of World War III? No. Once again, it's all part of the show. It's what we must remember throughout all this is not to save the United States. This is a global war. This is to save the planet. Unless the planet is saved, because it's not just about sovereign states and the deep state. And again, down the track, people start to understand the genuine breadth and depth of it. This is a war to save the entire planet. And so the entire planet has to play a role. The entire planet has to be engaged. The entire planet, everybody on the planet, to the extent possible, has to get to this stage where they understand that what they've been taught is wrong. So, again, it seems like I sort of drift away from the question, but I'm not. I'm on the question. This has a specific set of objectives for the Middle East and Europe, particularly NATO, Ukraine. That whole nonsense over there, Russia, it has little of real immediacy to any country outside of the area, but apparently does because it's going to be the course of World War III, which is nonsense. But I'm not worried about it. I have no concerns. But the results of the activities there will certainly shake up that region.
Sure. Well, thank you. Colonel Sellers, do you care to weigh in on the Iran issue?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Ricardo on this. I do not believe that we're going into a major war with Iran. I'm not saying, excuse me, I'm not saying that there won't be some kinetic action and other action that might happen there, just like Trump did just a few weeks and months ago with those strikes into Iran. But I've never thought that we're going to go into a major war with those guys. It doesn't serve any purpose for anybody, really. And there's much more present things that are happening elsewhere, like Ricardo was saying.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Derek, brief comments on Iran. Any input on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, people have to get back into, once again, terminology. There's a difference in a war and then strategic operations. And then you get into, again, I mean, Jimmy Carter, guy's gone. So I won't talk about the guy gone, but there's things that he did do that needs to be questioned in history, that needs to be looked at for the future. But Jimmy Carter's the one who established Executive Order 12170, November the 18th, 1979. I'm going to brag a little bit to you gentlemen here on the panel. You were alive then. I was not. All right. So I can brag and bring some humor in here. But that should show the audience that, listen, we're talking about a national emergency. Is that an emergency to be almost 47 years old? No, that's their failed diplomacy. And here's how you see that. President Trump hasn't started a war. Now, you got the best of the best on these panels out here. If you don't want to look at me as an expert, ladies and gentlemen, you got the best sitting right here with their years experience in the military. All right. There's a huge difference, again, in a war and strategic operations and strikes and certain things. But when you look at diplomacy, what is that word diplomacy? You know who said it the most? The Democrats and the liberals of the United States of America. It was always diplomacy. They were sitting there telling you, now that you know, especially you patriots, now you know that word was their quote unquote agenda, right? That was their rings, that was their money ties, their money laundering, etc. Because President Trump, that strike, right? The Iranian reports, every president before, quote unquote, what the people thought of Joe, President Trump had multiple reports given to him, and even Obama had multiple Iranian reports. There's a specific report that the president gets on certain nations. For 4 years that people thought Joe was president, there was only one Iranian report. That was December 28, 2024, which would be 4 weeks before January the 20th, 2025, President Trump. All right, so how come there weren't any Iranian reports? But Iran was in our what? They were all in our National Defense Authorization Act. So it shows you that Joe wasn't real. All right, this strike in Iran is strategic. And then it also exposes who else? The big one, Obama. Remember President Trump? Oh, everybody was called a conspiracy theorist and or called all kinds of other names for talking about the $150 billion that President Trump said that
Mhm.
Obama gave to Iran. And then we took it in where?
Mhm.
This is how the military is involved. We took it in our military aircraft over there. All right, so that's on our pay, our military, our Department of then Defense, not anymore. So guess what Obama's deal said? And this is real simple. Obama's great Iran deal said that Iran was going to decrease from 98% to 3.67% uranium enrichment. And the IAEA said that they were at 80%. Our general said they were at 80% of the much needed of 90%. If they were at 98%, they already had the number for a nuclear, but they were supposed to be down to 3.67, and they were at 80%. So they weren't upholding that promise. They weren't nowhere near that promise of the great Iranian deal by quote unquote Obama. So not only does it expose that the deal wasn't good, it also exposes that what the $150 billion was what the ties to the foreign interference, right? So and then President Trump all throughout 2024, the articles with our actual .gov sites and different people ties Iran into the assassination attempts of President Trump. So this is the tip of the iceberg for the bigger picture. And no, we're not going to war, and because that would destroy President Trump's legacy with it. Because this all ties into your national emergencies. It ties into the wars. They use the national emergencies for their quote unquote diplomacy. So he can't do that, and it won't do that because that would destroy everything of changing the whole way things have been done, and the 45-47, the reset, etc. So yeah, this is going to be we're not far from July the 4th too. Let's keep that in mind. That's supposed to be a big day
Yes.
in U.S. history. So
Mhm. Well, thank you. Yeah, and let's move on to. We're coming up against 2 hours soon, but I've got three more subjects I'd like to take on. So let's get let's get this on the record. Aliens. We discussed it briefly at the last month's panel where Sheila Holm had joined us, and Brad Wozni was in on the panel. But I'd like to raise it with this panel, and go where you choose to go. But the reason I'm raising, because I know it's a very confusing, very divisive issue for a host of reasons, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because of this. Based on tremendous, this is the President Donald J. Trump, I'm quoting, based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomenon UAP, and unidentified flying objects UFOs, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America. End quote, Donald J. Trump. So, for those that might be saying, why is Chambers taking on the subject of aliens, blah, 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 blah? Well, the reason why is because our commander in chief and President Donald J. Trump is taking it on. And so, therefore, let's have a brief discussion. There's layers and layers we can peel into on this subject, I'm sure, and maybe we'll nibble away at it, depending on what's going on in the world in the up and coming episodes. But, Lieutenant Colonel Bosi, what's your say on the subject of aliens and your commentary about President Trump's pretty strong words there?
Yeah, the words, excuse me, it'll be taken by many as, oh, he's trying to distract us from the Epstein files, and that's fine. He doesn't care. The issue of ETs needs to be needs to be raised because there are elements to the story that over time need to be revealed to the people. Are ETs real? Yeah, absolutely. How do we know? Well, if you've had experiences with them, then you've had experiences with them. Many people have. If you haven't, why have the black hats tried to deny their existence for many years? I mean, they only denied that which they know to be real. And the role that ETs have played in human history, potentially, for a long time, which blows the 6,000-year history, the biblical history of the planet out of the water. Role in ET manipulation of DNA of humans, in the creation of humans, the role of passing technology to humans over the years. These are all stories that are out there that many people have investigated. The story the reveal has to start, and what better way to start it than by having the president say, "Here we go." Now, having said that, don't expect everything to come flying out tomorrow. Not going to happen. This has to bubble and bubble and bubble and bubble and generate interest. And others will now come out and say, Dr. Stephen Greer, for example, will come out and say what he's been saying for many decades now, but with a greater audience. I'm not sure whether he's going to be making. I know he has a speech prepared for the president. Whether the president reveals that or not, I don't know. Who knows? But all of these stories are now going to start getting some currency. Once again, progressively and slowly, raising the issues with the target audience so they start to say, well, maybe there is something to it. Maybe all the predictive programming that's out there has actually been the slow release of data. Just, whether it's little green men in flying saucers or whether it's something more sophisticated than that. And then on top of that, this introduces the concept of technology. So it's not just little green men in flying saucers. If there are extraterrestrials, what technology do they have? What role has that technology played in human development, particularly in the 20th century, where we seem to take off very, very quickly? And very quickly, if you look at the technological advancement of the human species, it's not a smooth trajectory. Hang on, let me get my finger in the screen here so you can see it. Right. We sort of bubble along really slowly and do very little. And then there's a jump. And then it comes back down again because we don't do much. And then it jumps up again. And it bubbles along and down. And then it jumps up again. Ask yourself this question. What lucky monkey was staring at a burning lump of wood and saying, you know what, if we superheat some of this brown dirt to a particular temperature, we might get a metal out of it. And with that metal, we can make things. I'm sorry, but does that actually happen? You actually believe that's what occurred in the very first instance? Obviously not. So there needs to be another explanation. Then it opens up mythical tales. Gilgamesh, the saga of Gilgamesh, Enlil and Enlil, and a whole range of mythical stories over the millennia that seem to be telling the same story, with the same characters doing the same thing with different names. And even the Bible, which refers to the sky people, which refers to the powerful ones. Here's a newsflash. If you haven't read the Naked Bible by Mauro Biglino, it never once mentions, the Old Testament never once mentions a monotheistic God. It talks about the powerful ones. It talks about not what we've been told. Now, what you're going to do is this subject of ETs is going to throw open many locked chests full of information, and people can go where they want to go. But it's not just about little green men in flying saucers. It's another avenue to opening up and revealing the truth on a whole range of subjects, which is necessary in order for us to disabuse ourselves of our belief systems, so we are then open to a more accurate rendition of us, our origins, our role on the planet, and our history. So it's a very exciting time. DJT's given just excuse the mosquitoes, they're big enough to shear in Australia. DJT's done us the service of raising the issue, and that gives an imprimatur now to many people to go out there and say what they want to say, how they want to say it, in their own time, in their own way. And then the the administration will slowly release information it sees as valuable in advancing the ideas that need to be advanced. So that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, and great information there, and I've learned a lot. To our audience listening, if anyone's, I'll pedal you back. If you're still in the camp that says ETs and all this stuff doesn't exist, well then you got to rewind this and listen to the quote from the president. Of course, these things exist. There are files. They're going to be released. Drip, 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 as Ricardo stated. And that's a great education and analysis. Colonel Sellers, I know you have a thing or two to say about aliens, sir. This is a great time to get this on the record.
Yeah, I've done it before to some extent, but I, I have personal experience with it as of about starting 4 or 5 years ago. I've got, I've had I've seen multiple UFOs in different configurations. Finally, I got a picture of one. I was actually filming, well, I was actually watching this thing in the sky. It was on a November afternoon, um, blue sky, and it was a white ribbon it looked like a kite tail floating through the sky. And I watched it for 20 minutes and then I said, maybe I should film some of this. And so I got my camera and I started filming. And I filmed it for about another 20 minutes. Um, I went in and said, "All right, but let me look at what I filmed." Remember, what I saw in the sky, it looked like a brilliant white kite tail just streaming in the sky. So I'm looking at my film and I'm seeing blue sky, blue sky, blue sky, blue sky, and then all of a sudden, oh shit! There's a machine there. There's a craft there. It was a disc. It had a blue dome on top of it, and this was video, so it was coming in and out of the frame. Eventually, had the some of those frames frozen for me so that I got pictures of it. I don't have it with me on this right now. Um, so that was my first experience, and my wife watched it with me, and it was like, okay, something was up there. Um, and I think that what I took a picture of was I was seeing the camera was seeing it through a portal of some sort and got a picture of what was through the portal. And I've got that picture. Um, Sometime later, I want to say maybe 6 months or so later, I got visited by a team. Uh, it was interesting. It was about 10:30 at night on a Monday night, and 8 people walked through the wall of my living room, right through the wall. 7 of them looked human, and one of them looked at that time. I thought she looked like a Pleiadian, but doing more research, it was a different race, I believe. But she had almond-shaped eyes, white blonde hair, long, elongated, pointy face. Not ugly or anything like that. They stayed here for about 2 hours that night, and they just talked to me. There was not, there was nothing scary. There was nothing antagonistic about them. We just talked about. They were telling me wars are going on, but they're being won out there in the stars. Um, they wanted to know. It was interesting because they wanted to know what some of the items were around my house, so they were asking me to give them names of things. And we just stayed. They never spoke. It was all internal telepathy. And then they left. And then one of them came back. They came back every day for 6 days, and that's it. Started on a Monday. I had at least one visitor from the team every day for the next 6 days. They showed this was really interesting because part of it was they put a they put it was like a video, like a screen, like a movie screen, but like a big one around the walls of my bedroom or in there where, and it was just this ongoing, it was an ongoing saga of battles and wars and all different kinds of, going from swords to spaceships. And and at the end of it, I just had the feeling that they were showing me the history of Earth from the beginning of the occupied times, which is something like 22 million years ago. Um, and that was, I knew in my heart, in my head, I just knew that's what they were showing me. And so it was really interesting. That was one of the most interesting weeks that I've ever seen. And I can go. There's a lot more that happened there, but that's the gist of it. They weren't. It wasn't like being attacked by the Kili Turcourt, who probably were the first ones on Earth in 22 million years ago, and who were in that era, that time of Enlil and Enlil. Um, the ones that are in the Book of Enoch.
Hmm.
So I
Fascinating.
totally thought they should release this all those years.
Hmm. Let me ask you just one quick follow up, and then I want to make a quick announcement, and we'll take that question to Derek. Um, did you think to yourself? I'm sure you did, and if you didn't, please do so now. Why me? I mean, there's
Oh,
several
absolutely,
billion of us,
absolutely,
and
and
what did you
actually
get?
that
What
came
was
up.
your yeah? You
It
so
came
explain
up.
that to me. What
It
was
was part of
your
the
takeaway?
conversation,
What's your
and it
takeaway?
was it was really interesting. So why I honest that again, there's no conversation going on. This is all telepathy, but I think they're. It wasn't just me. So they're down here and they're identifying people that they can work with,
Mm,
and for us to be able to understand them and to possibly pass messages for them to other people who maybe disbelieve or whatever. And the last thing they told me before they left is that we do have to leave now because we're heading first to California to do the same thing with another individual, and then we have to double back to New York to do the same thing with another individual, which I thought was really interesting. And it makes total
yes.
sense to me. If I were going down on an away team, would they, find out what the inhabitants are like, find out if they're going to be hostile or friendly, will they be helpful? I think I would have done it the exactly same way that they did it.
Mhm.
So I mean, it
Yes.
impressed me.
Interesting.
It was impressive.
Oh, I'm sure
Michelle
it did.
was out there.
Wow.
Michelle couldn't see him, and I've gotten into this with someone at one of the. You were there, Derek. I can't remember her name. Blonde, blonde girl that was there with us, and I was telling
Mhm.
that story, and she said, "Well, I think it's obvious why Michelle couldn't understand because you were talking telepathy, and they were actually on a totally you were actually on their frequency, and were in a totally different frequency of communication, which Michelle couldn't see or hear, but they could get you to that
Mm.
frequency so that they could communicate. All of that. I'm a physics major. All of that makes sense."
Yep. Last quick question, Colonel Sellers, and we'll to go to Derek. Did maybe a rhetorical question? Did you save that film of what you and your wife saw in the sky? You said you filmed it. Do you have that film?
Yes, I do, and I can send you a picture. I have a freeze
I would
frame
love to.
of the
Yeah.
of the object itself, and it looked like a pretty traditional saucer object with a blue dome. Think on the top, based on the way it
Mhm.
was tilted. But I do have a picture of it, and I'll send it to you.
Thank you. And lastly, to our viewers, I host another program called Conversations of Consequence, where we feature some of the important voices of our times, get to learn about who they are, their journey, maybe back to childhood. You gain some good insights into the individual, which brought them to the place they are. And then, of course, we have them weigh in on the events of the day. And it's a good programming. Ricardo Bosi was there. Derek Johnson, we've had in there. We've had General Valet. We've had Juan O'Savin, Mary Fanning back in the day with the Hammer and Scorecard. A lot of different individuals, Lloyd Brunson, Pat Burners of recent, my good friend Dr. Tenpenny. Chuck, I know we were working out some technological issues. Please stay with Sandy on that because I'd like to explore that even further in Conversations of Consequence. So thank you. Derek, you care to weigh in on the
Absolutely.
alien issue before I jump us into elections?
Well, yeah, and I'm not the host, obviously, but I was going to ask Colonel Sellers something. If you could, can you elaborate a little or whatever about Area 51? Because I know you have been there. or was it Jaco? I know Jaco's been
No,
there,
I've been there. I've
but
been there.
just
But you got there's a I think where you have to
of
think
course there's
about Area
other
51.
areas, but still,
There
yeah.
are, um, and I've done research and know some of those places. Dulce, there's others, but Area 51, yes, I've been there several times. But what you have to remember about Area 51 is that you have levels of security, right? So you start with a
Hmm.
confidential clearance, then you have a secret clearance, then you have a top secret clearance, then you have a Q clearance, and then you go on and on and on, right? So where we were always above ground. We were doing rehearsals for upcoming operations there, and in my mind, everything that's at Area 51, other than the stealth fighters, which were in the hangars, and those guys were all hidden in those days. Now they're all out there for everybody to see. But everything that of consequence that happens at Area 51, I believe it does happen, but it happens in layers and layers and layers underground,
I
and
just
all
wanted to
kinds of
give
top
people
secret
that
stuff going on.
that well, people need to hear that too, because a lot of some of our MOSs come with clearance, and then some you have to obviously attain. But there's so many levels of clearance that people just don't get to hear about, don't get to really, see that there's so many different layers that we talk about, even in the military. And not everybody on each layer is going to know, because it's kind of like the Coca-Cola formula. If everybody had the formula, then you'd be in some breaches of national security and some dangerous situations. You'd always have people in compromise, right? So I've flown over Area 51 in the military. You have to have clearance to fly over it too.
Yeah, yeah.
People don't even realize certain things like that. So, but and that's an honor to me, because I'm like, just to even fly around a presence like that is pretty cool. But I like I like for people to see, because like John was talking about, people start in this topic, they forget that the president addressed this, right? And they get over here thinking
Yes.
that all of us are probably smoking the devil's lettuce, seeing all these different things, and it's not the case. Um, but
Yes.
anyway, like I tell people, first and foremost, personal preference. All right, if you're not interested in it, it don't make any of us crazy. It don't make anybody less credible. It don't make anything. If it's your personal preference not to listen to these topics, then that's okay. You can fast forward. You can cut off. You can do other things, right? But then you got to go. Then it's personal preference versus what? Who's letting go of the files? The president is, which means he's also commander in chief, which means there's going to be a portion of government and a portion of military anytime the president is addressing any situation. People believe in angels. A lot of Christians believe in angels and would say that aliens are crazy. I'm like, well, who's to
Right.
say aliens are bad? Right? We don't. If you've never had a personal experience, you don't know if they're good or bad. Right? We also know there could be what there. The Bible tells us there's demons. Well, that's in a spirit form, right? It's not in anything that we see all the time. You can see them, right? We know that.
Mhm.
So the other thing about aliens is the fact that whether they are, like Lieutenant Colonel Bosi said, little green Martians or this, that, and the other, well, let me show you something that you don't realize. People say, well, why would we see it more often? Well, we work around you all the time in the military, and you never see us working. So helicopters, aircraft flying all the time, and you don't even know it's us. You don't know what that aircraft is. And then this gets in more to my specialty. What I actually did in the Army was military with the my MOS is 14 Sierra Air Missile Defense, right? We have to pick a plane out of a cloud in 5 seconds and identify that aircraft. We may only see the fuselage, we may only see the wing, we may only see the nose. So we have to identify that really quick. So I'm a connoisseur of the aircrafts and what they are, what they look like, what kind of weapon capability do they have, how fast do they fly, things of that nature. Had to know all that. So with my naked eye, I can hear a helicopter and just about tell you what it's going to be before it gets there, where it is it already past you, those things. So this is kind of like what we call our forte when it comes to that. And as that Lieutenant Colonel Bosi just said, technology. This is getting in more into technology than it is just simply, are there aliens, are there not aliens? This is getting into technology. The Golden Dome that President Trump talks about, but then also Space Force, and all the different things. So it's gonna open up a new can of what has been suppressed through the years. See, that's the other thing people forget about. People think you know everything because you think that what's on the internet is accessible to you. It's only accessible because they allow you to have it. All right. And so it's the same thing with this. This opens a whole other element of what's been suppressed all these years, just like Colonel Sellers here, Area 51. There's multiple areas that are all secret, clearance, layers, etc. And you've never heard about them. Some people, some have heard about Area 51 because of movies, but that's as far as it goes because you can't research it a whole lot. So this opens up a massive more can of of intelligence and knowledge that they're saying, hey, we're now going to allow you to be privy to this, and it's going to be one of those things. Hey, even if it's not your preference, nosedive it, read about it, see something that you've never heard or seen or maybe known about. And one of our other panelists that we have on here sometimes, a friend of mine, Lieutenant Colonel Lennox, he and I were at the Trump Doral last spring for the Charlie Ward event, and we were sitting out by the pool, just trying to catch some rays, and that there's an airport right over, which you can imagine what kind of clearance they already have flying over Trump Doral, but there was nothing they could do with the location of that, obviously. But so there's aircraft flying over, and I'm talking about you just about see the passengers waving. All right, so we're sitting there, and I'm looking way up because I'm just fascinated with the certain aircraft that were flying in, and so we're looking, and I got this on video. I have multiple ones on video, but I said, hey, Colonel, look, way up there, and everybody else sitting there. I mean, we have like 100 people that were out at the pool who witnessed this, and it's like a shiny object, real shiny, silver, shiny, way above the aircraft, and you can see it for a long ways. All right, you can see it, and so it's that's one example, but you got to be looking for it. Is what I try to tell people. You have to know what you're looking for, then you got to be looking for it, and then you got to see it in your region. I know a spot where I'm sitting right now, right up the road, about 3 miles. I can go out. I've got multiple videos, and I've taken friends out there to let them witness it. Now they haven't been operating there lately, but I have it on videos, not just pictures too. But you have to be in a spot where they're operating. And then, I mean, sometimes there'll be 8, 10, 20. I mean, the one night I had both buddies out there. I bet there were 15 different operating. And you can tell the difference because aircraft are flying around as well. I mean, you can see the difference in an aircraft. You can hear the aircraft. You can see the blinking lights. These are more of a big bright light, and then it'll just disappear. And so, when you get it on camera and you zoom in, it's a whole different color. It's a colorization. And they've been teasing this to the public. I have a link somewhere. I'll see if I can find it. But there is a mainstream audience out there. They're trying to say that this is some form of a satellite specially designed for this, and this. So they are getting it out in another manner because they know it will be one of those things that if they don't present it properly, then people will just overlook it in another manner and then do the norm. Oh, you guys are crazy and you're smoking this and that. But it's a personal preference, and for other people. So it's one of those things that I think that once they do put this out, maybe it'll open up for more guys to be able to talk. That's been at Area 51 about the clearance levels and what they have seen. Because we're moving into a whole other realm moving into the future. Technology is not going away. And I think that's what that's leading to, is that, hey, they're ready. We're decimating the deep state and all their shenanigans and what they've been suppressing from people, and what they're going to give to people is nothing scary, right? It's nothing to fear. If you're living, breathing, walking, you're going to live through it anyway. So you shouldn't fear.
You can look up the records.
Fascinating
There's records
subject.
of. I'm just one real quick one, John. There's records of the Eisenhower administration signing the Greada Treaty, and it was with the Greys, the Gray aliens, and it was a treaty that allowed that gave us technology, some of their technology, in exchange for occasional human to be taken by them for experimentation. And that was it. That was during
Thank
the
you.
Eisenhower administration.
Mhm. You know, to our audience, which is a wide spectrum of people and in many countries, I will just put this out there, and it's common sense. If you still don't want to believe that there's life beyond us on this earth, um, you're up against a lot of challenges because the presidents for decades have been looking at top secret files concerning this. And our president today is now going to start releasing them. A couple of quick comments. I took some notes, and we're going to close out with one last question on elections in a moment. But allow me this moment. You to our audience, put on a seatbelt, and as Lieutenant Colonel Bosi said, don't expect everything to be coming out in one fell swoop on aliens. It'll be a drip, just like everything else has been, especially something of this magnitude. People, we need to just. This is a fascinating time to be alive. Just watch it, and anything that requires action, in terms of the war we're involved in, get busy, but just take it in. This is an extraordinary time to be here. We're gonna get over the years, 9/11, Benghazi, the missing Bible books, the revocation of many laws and executive orders once all the presidencies, perhaps all the way back to George Herbert Walker Bush, but certainly through Clinton, were fraudulent. Juan has discussed this in great detail. Get ready for all these things. Get ready for the uncomfortableness of AI and the welcoming of AI. Get ready for Benghazi to finally be unpacked and taken on, and J6 and the Wiener laptop, worse than Epstein files, if you can possibly fathom that. On the converse, Tesla, the 6,500 patents, the repatriation of the wealth, the med beds. This is an incredible time. Just calm down, in my opinion. Maybe the wrong advice. We're trying to fire them up, but anyway, I put that there. Also, I produce another show called Eyes on Gitmo. Retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt of Newsmax, 107, retired Lieutenant Colonel Matt Meck, who's Juan's chief of staff. He's been to Gitmo, was a part of tribunals after 9/11, and also helped to some extent set up the military press room that's there now, which I understand is the size of a university gymnasium. So, but what I'm getting at here is I raised this question of aliens. I didn't. I was going to raise it on the recent Eyes on Gitmo. We ran out of time. But in the beginning, I said, we're going to talk about aliens later. So when we closed out the show and we ran out of time, Brigadier General Blaine Holt raised something interesting. And it feeds into the point of what Derek and I think mainly Colonel Sells was talking about. There's more than Area 51. And there's here on Earth, and then there are also a lot of other things he named terms and in up there that I had never heard of, and unfortunately we ran out of time. But I intend to unleash him on that next month. I wanted to put that out there. Another quick note I took was, I think it's Project Bluebeam. Someone on the panel can correct me if I'm wrong, where we project certain images into the sky, and it's like, oh, there's Jesus, or wow, look, there's an alien. And so Blaine Holt, again, he 30-second comment on it, but he dropped this in there too. He said, which made me question, is the public going to have to differentiate from blue beam versus reality? There's going to be some of that in there as well. So we'll jump into all this at another time. I just wanted to put that out there, and I come full circle with retired Lieutenant Colonel Bosi. It is a drip, 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 and you got a lot of drips here, folks, but it's going to come straight from the administration now, from your commander-in-chief and President Donald J. Trump, under this continuity of government. So I'm excited about it personally. Let's close out this panel with elections. A lot of information floating around out there. I don't, if I have too many of the quotes sitting here, let me look at my little notes section here. Pardon me for not being so structured as I often am. Okay, here we go. Elections. There's a state of the national emergency, is what we hear, that may be invoked to help us have secure elections. The president said this: there will be voter ID for the midterm elections, whether approved by Congress or not. Also, the people of our country are insisting on citizenship and no mail-in ballots. The president also went on to say, with exceptions, I'm sorry to my audience, but we're having technical issues here. I'm told we're good. My screen is frozen. I'll continue speaking. Pardon me. The president, I'll continue, said, the people of our country are insisting on citizenship and no mail-in ballots, with exceptions for military, disability, illness, or travel. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So that's straight from the commander-in-chief. What do you see? What do you hear out there, Lieutenant Colonel Bosi, in terms of how we're going to secure the primaries are important right now, but I'm fast forwarded to the midterm elections. Forget about the general elections down the line. These midterms are very, very important. And I'm just put myself on the record when I used to speak at the Clay Clark Reawaken tours for over those years. I said it then, and I'll say it today, and a lot of other people say the same thing. You can't get past. You can't save America, restore the constitutional republic, and put humanity on a course correction until we get the election things sorted out. If that isn't sorted out, you don't have a country. So in my opinion, we are going to sort that out. We are going to have a free and fair election in the midterms, and I stand by my conviction in that statement. But I'm more interested to know what you gentlemen have to say about that. What do you know about this issue, Ricardo, and what do you see happening come the general election? Are we going to get ripped off again?
The conduct of the elections are fundamental. The trust of the people that they are not being subject to a tyrannical takeover is key. An election is a centerpiece of that, hence the Save America Act and all the rules that be in place. So this is to ensure that the people understand that they remain in charge. They are the source of law, no problem. Notwithstanding martial law, we get that. Now, having said that, there are three things that have to be done. One, the electoral roll has to be sanitized. The electoral process has to be regularized so it is free from interference. And thirdly, the group running the elections have to be clean. They have to be individuals that are trusted to do the right job. We have the same problem here in this country. So those three mechanical steps have to take place before you can have the election. Other people are going to be ripped off this time? I don't think so. But those three preconditions must be met. If they're not met, then the people are going to get another dodgy election. Now, I'll give you an example of what happened here. Our organization contested 6 elections in 5 years. We provided ample evidence of election fraud, boxes of ballots being taken out of booths in private vehicles and then being driven away to who knows where, individuals changing the vote on actual ballots, and results that came up in record time, which it was virtually impossible to have got the result within the very short time since the booths closed. Things like that. It's just prima facie evidence. In fact, in my electorate, I ran in a number of elections, and in my federal electorate, nobody voted for me, which is interesting because I voted for me, my wife voted for me, my son voted for me, one of the other candidates voted for me, and not one vote. And we had a forensic engineer go through the analysis, and there was a 6 sigma variation from a standard deviation, basically meaning the odds of 1 in 20, 30 billion of that occurring. So the results were just fraudulent. So we had a ton of evidence. But what's more important is this. In that election, we understand that certainly in my electorate, the corrupted system didn't have the people to count the dodgy votes or steal the votes, and so they brought the military in to do that. And the military were there counting the votes, and they actually got the results. And I've been advised that I actually won my seat. Now that might or might not be
Wow.
true. I didn't ask the question; it was offered to me by somebody else, and I went, well, if that's true, the back pay would be nice, but I haven't done the work, so we'll just call it quits and let's do it. So, but the point is, the White Hats are operating at a couple of levels here, so I don't think they don't know exactly what the answers are. As we know from the 2020 election, they have everything. They know exactly who changed the ballots, when they changed it, how they changed the ballots. The data's there. Same here in Australia to an extent, not to the same depth. So will there be elections? Absolutely. Will they be free and fair and honest? If the three preconditions I mentioned are met, if that's the case, and it's important that they do have a free and fair election so that people are assured that they are not moving into a tyrannical organisation. Excuse me again. But their voice will
Deep
be
state
heard in the ballot
mosquito.
box, and the government. Yeah, they're very friendly in Australia. Bring lots of whatever you need to get rid of them. They used to issue Australian Army soldiers an insect repellent, which you need to hear because they're pretty enthusiastic. This stuff used to melt you put on your face. This is a sidebar comment. You put on your face and it'd melt the rubber cover for the M60 butt. I remember the M60. There was this rubber butt. You put your head down, you pull your face away, and half the rubber came away on your face. That's how strong the stuff here is in Oz. Anyway, back to the elections. Preconditions. Sanitize the electoral rolls. Regularize the process and get some honest people to run the show. If you can do that, if they can actually implement the Save America Act, yes, you'll get an election. Yes, you'll get free and fair elections, and the midterms are a great time to do it. And the people will see for themselves, one way or the other, exactly what a free and fair election looks like. You can imagine the board; it'll be red from sea to shining sea.
You bet. Well, thank you. And just a quick comment. You mentioned the Save America Act. Maybe I'm incorrect on this, but it's got to get through the Senate now, and it's never going to make it. And the president, in my opinion, and the president has already handled that. He published on X. I don't have it in front of me. I'm paraphrasing. The summary of it was, we're going to get these elements in place in the Save America Act with or without the Senate. I find that interesting. I can't wait for Derek to comment on how of that. But Colonel Sellers, do you care to weigh in on the free and fair elections? Because without it, we ain't moving forward, in my opinion.
No, I think it's crucial. But until it gets there, military law needs to stay in place. And the status of the SAVE Act, it passed the Congress only by 3 votes, 218 to 215, and that was with one Democrat that came over and voted on the Republican side on that. So knowing that, the chances of it getting through the Senate, like you said, are pretty slim. And so leave it to Trump to have a backup plan because we're going to need one.
Well, great. Absolutely. No question about it. And okay, so Derek, if you want to take that on, you'll be closing out the final question on this panel. And then I've got an interesting thing to leave us with, but please take it on, Derek. Free and fair elections, yes or no? And how's Trump able to say that in that X post that we're going to get this done with or without you? How's that work?
Well, so this is the consolation for people. This is not telling people to sit on their thumbs like Lieutenant Colonel Bosi and I always talk about. Don't sit on your thumbs. But you can't be involved until you know the format, the blueprint, the solution. You can't get involved without knowing that. It's like I wouldn't go work on my truck if I didn't know the manual. That'd be dumb because I'm not a mechanic. I'm gonna mess something up. And not only am I going to mess it up trying to fix it, I won't be able to fix it back either. Right? So why would I do that without knowing it? So it's like mechanics. Mechanics know their field because they study it, they live it, they breathe it. Right? So this is what shows people. This is all in operation. This is one of the first executive orders with a national emergency, even though it was in 2018. But the Executive Order 13848 for election interference. Why would quote unquote Joe continue that 4 years in a row if President Trump is a threat, a Nazi, a king, and a dictator? Why would Joe do that, right? So those are things that gets people thinking if they've never heard this. It declared a national emergency, and it's for election interference. It has a key line in there, 2 lines. It says, although no foreign power or vote tabulation has altered any election. So that's very key. That's got a lot. That packs a punch. Vote tabulation, ladies and gentlemen, is January the 6th. Then it says any outcome, meaning like there's any. So that's exposing the foreign interference, right? The foreign interference. So that's going to expose all that. They already coming out with all the votes from 2020, Georgia, Nevada, all these things. Then this goes into this. Military orders are not continuous orders. The left's over there yelling, a president has to have congressional authorization to use the military. That's correct. They're yelling the correct thing, but they don't know how to apply it. Because again, after this executive order was signed and declared, our National Guard cybersecurity teams were deployed for the election 2018, 2020, 22, and 24. So there has to be another order in place for Joe to have had them at 22 and 24. There's not. All right, so that shows you cohesion with the original plan. It also ties in President Trump in the 2020 debate. We have it all. We've caught them all because us in the military, the National Guard cybersecurity teams, just like Lieutenant Colonel Bosi was just talking about, they have forensic evidence, meaning we're not just working with digital because we work with analog. We can see who's hacking. We can see if they're adding, deleting, who it is, where they are, etc. So that's why they said in November, 4-star General Nakasone, he said specifically in a tweet on November the 3rd, 2020, he said, we have our National Guard cybersecurity teams, along with our Cyber Command, the National Security Command, and our joint partners all around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a big team. He was talking about all of our Cyber Command. He wasn't just talking about one little portion. He's talking about our whole Cyber Command, our joint partners all around the world, and our National Security Command, all right, with our National Guard. So the National Guard are doing the lead work. These guys are up here collecting all this data in there. All these people yelling about Palantir, you probably don't want to be yelling about Palantir because they're working with this. All this data is going into one base, and it's to President Donald John Trump and our military, our generals, our admirals. All right. President Trump put a tweet out August the 18th, 2023. This shows you, too, the operation. This is August the 18th, 2023. President Trump put a tweet out about the Supreme Court should address the 7 swing states. Well, nowhere in history before has there been the same swing states of one election and the next election. Never. That's the exposure of the deep state. That's the exposure of the Smartmatic systems, the Dominion systems. The 7 swing states of 2020 were the same 7 swing states in 2024. President Trump filed a lawsuit December the 14th, 2020, which would have been a month after, right? That's the date that the delegates had to have their votes in, right, to what was going to happen on January the 6th. He filed a lawsuit via the state of Texas, via the United States Supreme Court. How did he win the 7 swing states in 24? And he's tweeting over here in 23 that the Supreme Court, it shows everybody that, look, this is all plans, all an operation, right? The other portion, they got to get people involved the right way. As Lieutenant Colonel Bosi said, the law still got to be there. Integrity's got to be there. We got to get people involved. But the way he can do this is what I just read a while ago from the Law of War and Peace, and then also the Law of War Manual. We're in a straight-up military government. In a military government, the constitutional law is suspended. We're under military law. Now, every bit of a military government is trying to get that constitutional law to be back in place the right way, meaning the right people, the right systems, etc. So we had to clean it out first. Now we got to get the right people in who wants to be there in the first place. You know, there's some people who don't want to be in these roles. So we got to find the right people. Then you got to train them in the systems. Then you got to make sure they're not compromised themselves along the way, right? So all these things are going together. And then you just got to know that it's an occupied territory. And President Trump said this 9 days before the election. He said it, what I said earlier in the show. He said, we're an occupied country. We will soon no longer be an occupied country. The Great Liberation. Well, when you go read about this, there's something that also happened recently in another manner. 2024, all the mainstream headlines read that Joe abandoned D.C. because it was all Kamala. Everybody saw Kamala. If you went to Wikipedia as we speak, ladies and gentlemen, when you're watching this, if you went to Wikipedia, all right, and you looked up presidential transition and click on Wikipedia, scroll down, it'll say Biden, Trump. It says that Kamala signed off on the transition. She wouldn't have anything to do with that. Being a candidate, she would be a vice president, ladies and gentlemen, would have no say so in that. It says Biden the next day signed off that it was going to happen, the transition. Why would Kamala be first, ladies and gentlemen? What did President Trump say? What did he say January the 13th, 2021, before we went into the executive branch takeover and the military government and the continuity government and your military occupation, everything, your government in exile, your puppet government? What did President Trump say? He said the 25th Amendment is no concern to me, but it will come back to haunt Joe Biden. So they're going to show what a puppet government, all these things. Well, Joe was absent, but the headlines read what? Abandoned. If you went to Google and typed in abandoned, Joe Biden abandons, there's mainstream articles that show Joe Biden abandoned office. Now, I'm going to read this too really quick. I pulled this just for this because it's perfect. In the Law, War, and Peace, it says, even the right of sovereignty is gained by a people or a king by long-standing possession. From what we have said, it is plain that a king can acquire a right as a king against a king, an independent state against an independent state, not only by express agreement, but also abandonment of ownership and the occupation which follows it or assumes a new force from it. Now, how does that tie in? Now, what I try to tell people, and I've been re-emphasizing this, is that look, none of this was desirable. Nobody wanted it. We don't want to be here. None of us want to be here. Now we're good at what we do, and we're glad to be here, but it's not desirable. We'd much rather be doing a lot of other things, but because this is these gentlemen's specialty, and it's one of my specialties, we're here, and we'd be doing you an injustice for not being here and doing what we've been called to do. So the Law War Manual is very specific on the military government. It says military government is the form of administration which by an occupying power exercises governmental authority over the occupied territory. The necessity for such government arises from the failure or inability of the legitimate government to exercise functions on account of a military occupation or the undesirability of allowing it to do so. So it tells you right there that, look, we didn't want to be here, but we are here. What brought us to this in history? What brought us to this is the fact that we have Americans. We'll just give everybody a hall pass for a moment. We have Americans who can't even name the three branches of government. President Trump has done some major validations of me in the last 6 weeks heavily. I'm the only person, and I'm not discrediting the gentleman here, they know that, but and anybody else, Jaco, et cetera, anybody, but from specifics to show people that we're all here together, we're all on the same playing field, we all are doing the same thing. President Trump has shared Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I'm the only one that's talked about that. I'm also the one that's all people, everywhere I go across the country, people go, they'll name the three branches of government for me. Because that's one of the things I talked about over and over, that data shows on average, wherever they get it from, but 68 to 75% of Americans can't even name the three branches of government. But they're demanding justice. They're yelling, kicking, cussing, screaming, all these other things, but don't know the three branches of government. What did they use not long ago under oath? They used a certain law enforcement fellow who was asked a question. He was asked, can you name the three branches of government? He couldn't name them. All right. So they're showing all these people. So, in that regards, people don't know the verbiage, they don't know the terminology, they don't know the language, therefore they're not going to know the provisions, they won't know, the applications, etc. So a lot of this is still, again, it's a massive re-education, but it's also a massive kind of, slap on the wrist for Americans as well, because everybody's got to stand in front of the mirror and say, I allowed this to happen, but how can we prevent it? All right, now what validates all those, the occupied, President Trump and the media have used the terms capitulation, white flag of surrender, occupied country, puppet government, and restoration. None of those are federal government anything. Every single one of those you can find in the Law of War Manual and or the Law of Land Warfare. All right, and so it's all validation. President Trump, September 2025, he was sitting with the Turkish president. He said, while I was in exile, he pauses. He says exile 3 times. When he does it, he pauses and he puts that word basically on a pedestal where he puts emphasis around it. While I was in exile, then he said, he remained my friend while I was in exile. And then he goes, while I was in exile. That's how he does it. He's not saying, while I was in exile, blah, 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 blah. He puts emphasis on it. Government in exile. All right. And then a reporter in February 2025, a reporter asked President Trump about Russia, about a puppet government and a capitulation. Those are not federal government terms, ladies and gentlemen. That's military government. And then so this right here, this brings us into that. Once you know all those validations, once you know they're just straight out of the Law of War Manual, the Law of Land Warfare, and it's a military government, then when he said the other day, he said, we will have safe elections. We will have secure elections, whether Congress passes or not. That is a military government. That is a supreme commander telling you, look, the continuity of government, that's for our target audience. All the stuff you see on the news, all this stuff, anybody who's in that, and they haven't heard me or Lieutenant Colonel Bosi and all of us here, then unfortunately they're going to have to see what they have to see. But if you're seeing me right now talking as we speak, then you don't have to be that target audience. All right, you don't have to be that. So you got to learn this language, this verbiage, and then that's a supreme commander saying congressional law don't matter right now. Constitutional law don't matter right now because we're reestablishing what was hijacked from all of us and you, the people out there that don't know what's going on. It's still hijacked from you, even though you still have to play a role. But it's him saying, we're going to do this. I do a parent analogy. A lot of people are parents, and most people are good parents, especially when a child's 3, 4, 5 years old and may pick up a shiny knife. Well, it's shiny to the child. The child don't know it's a knife. It's just shiny to them. And you panic. You run over there and get the knife out of their hands. Well, you hope someday when they're 16, 17, 18 years old, somewhere where they know exactly what a knife is then, and the appreciation factor that, hey, when you were 3 years old, you picked up a knife and it could have cut your finger off. It could have cut your hand off. And now you play guitar or piano or something wonderfully, or, and they say, thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad, for doing it. This is what President Trump and the military generals and admirals and world leaders that are all part of what we're all a part of, this is what we're a part of. It's saying, look, we know you didn't know. We know you don't know. And that's okay. But this is what's going on. We're going to fix it. It's going to be cleaned out. But look, before we hand it back to you, you're going to be fully schooled and taxed. And then also, if you're not, we're going to do Lieutenant Colonel Bosi. We're going to have him tell you, hey, men, reach into your wife's purse and pull out your jock strap down there by her tampon and put it back in your britches. I just love that. I just love that. I'm going to use that forever. I just got to use it. So that's a military governor, supreme commander telling you that, look, this is what's going to happen. And all these executive orders prove it. All these laws prove it. All the National Guard deployment. And it's just what military does at the end of the day is we look out for everybody else first before we look for ourselves.
I think Tim would grab the tampon. But anyway, great analysis. Thank you, Derek, for that. And quick comment. I, for one, have a high degree of confidence based on the feedback from this panel and the president's post on X that our free and fair elections are going to get restored, and they're going to get restored starting the midterm. And that's what I believe is where we are heading. And thank God for that. So I want to also just say there's been an interesting program. We've done about a year and a half of these monthly Global Defense War panels. And I thank you, gentlemen, and the others that aren't here very much for that. But today there's been some interesting phenomenons. We've had turbo mosquitoes in Australia. We have technical snafus here in Thailand, and we have the disappearing of Michael Jaco. Maybe an alien picked him up and took him somewhere else and said, "We need you over here, sir." I don't know, but it's been a very informative episode as usual. Thanks to our esteemed panel. So to our audience, please visit jmcbroadcasting.com. On the upper left-hand portion, it says contributors. Click on that, and you'll see these gentlemen and others that contribute to this network of broadcasting, military intelligence and economic reporting. You have their biographies there and a link directly to their platforms and their world to follow them beyond this monthly broadcast. I'm going to sign us off and introduce an interesting promotional commercial for the other show we host right now. But thank you, gentlemen, so much for being here, and I'll be right back.
Join Juan O'Savin, retired Lieutenant Colonel Matt Meck, retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt, and other prominent military and intelligence guests for an ongoing monthly broadcast with John Michael Chambers as your host here on jmcbroadcasting.com. The premiere episode launches Friday, September 26, 2025, and is sponsored by Genesis Gold. Visit jmcgenesismetals.com. This panel will address, among other subjects of great importance, what's taking place with the military tribunals, sealed and unsealed indictments, and the avalanche of arrests to come. Will justice be served? This and much more will be addressed each month, including an analysis of current events, making sense of the events as they unfold, one psyop after another. Detecting truth from lies in the dying age of fake news and the rising age of AI and digital enhancements will help you to remain focused and grounded in these most challenging, difficult, and dangerous final battles. A new day is dawning as this golden age is at the doorstep. Remain informed, empowered, and connected by an elite team of military and intelligence experts, and together we will save America. Subscribe for free at jmcbroadcasting.com and be sure to join us monthly. Eyes on Gitmo, wartime analysis. Nothing can stop what's coming, and the best is yet to come. Where we go one, we go all here at jmcbroadcasting.com.
All right. I want to thank again our esteemed guests for their time and expertise in today's panel, addressing the issues and concerns that each and every one of you have. I do my best each month to try and bring those issues to the table to dismantle the deception and make sense of the madness and keep us all informed, empowered, and connected at jmcbroadcasting.com. Okay, I mentioned this in the beginning of the show. Derek Johnson, join us. Derek and I on the screen in our private premier meeting. This is a Q&A hour, 1 hour to get your questions answered with Derek Johnson. That is coming up, I believe, March 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern. Visit JMC Broadcasting, look at free subscription and premium portal, and all the information is there for you to come join us. I want to thank Michael Jaco, who joined us on February 26th. Thank you, Michael Jaco, for that. Prior to Michael, the premier was Will Barney, and now our third monthly private Q&A for our premium members is Derek Johnson's. Come learn all about that at jmcbroadcasting.com. And be sure to follow Ricardo Bosi and I every other Monday. We've been doing this now in our second year. Bosi Briefs, Ricardo Bosi and I, there he is, all right. Every other Monday, Bosi Briefs, very popular, very powerful, lean and mean, and engaging conversations on the events of the previous weeks, covered every other week with Ricardo. So that's it. Be sure to catch my war reports, which are now daily, 3 to 5 minutes, war reports published now daily, 7 days a week, by visiting jmcbroadcasting.com. A long broadcast here. Thanks for staying along with us through the very end. Be safe, stay alert, and may God be with you.